Owning a home has always been key to the American dream. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, home ownership is a pillar of wealth building for most families, a source of wealth that can be passed down to future generations.
Having the ability to purchase a home and live where one chooses is, should be a fundamental right.
As African Americans moved to Wisconsin in large numbers after World War II, they entered a segregated housing market.
When we think about racism, when we think about Jim Crow, we have a tendency to focus on the South when it was universal throughout the United States.
Including here in Wisconsin, where starting around 1900, racism was built into home ownership.
Racially restrictive covenants were clauses that were inserted into property deeds that prevented people who were not white from owning, buying, or occupying property.
Ann Bonds and Derek Hanley are professors at UW Milwaukee, where they map old covenants in the city of Milwaukee and its surrounding suburbs.
By 1928, about half of all homes that were owned by white people in the United States had some sort of a racially restrictive covenant.
Often, restrictive covenants had sweeping language. Derek Handley reads this one from Wauwatosa.
Number 8, ownership and occupancy by members of white race only. No lot in said subdivision shall be conveyed or leased to or occupied by any person who is not a member of the white race. This prohibition is not intended to include domestic servants while employed by an owner or occupant of any such lot. So now African Americans have limited areas in which they can live, in which they can spread. And so now they're going to be crowded into one area.
Black people who come during the Great Migration are already coming to a space that has a history of anti-blackness, that has a history of racism. These are the people who are shaping the texture of your life.
Dr. Christy Clark Pujara, a UW-Madison history professor, also works with the Madison organization Nehemiah. She's an instructor in its Justified Anger, Black History for a New Day course. The 9-week course teaches the community about race, history, and justice.
Housing is critical because this idea of being able to pay the same amount month after month for 30 years with little to no money down transformed American life.
While restrictive covenants were made unenforceable by a 1948 Supreme Court ruling, they continued to be added to property deeds.
After 1948, we have examples of deeds in the 1950s, and the latest one we found so far is 1962.
Even though covenants fell out of use in the 60s, other long-standing tools of racial segregation, like redlining, continued to carve up neighborhoods.
The term redlining comes from a set of maps that were drawn by the federal government.
Reggie Jackson educates people about diversity. He says that the redlining maps weren't common knowledge.
They were, for the most part, secretive maps. Nobody really knew they existed other than bankers and some realtors.
And so the Homeowners Loan Corporation in 1933 and the Federal Housing Administration in 1934 adopted a mechanism where they drew lines on a map.
UW-Madison professor Kurt Paulson is a historian of urban planning.
What redlining said was who could get a mortgage refinanced.
Redlining maps, like this one drawn for Milwaukee in 1938, divided cities into 4 grades. Green areas were considered the best place for banks to invest in, while red areas were deemed hazardous and not worthy of additional investment.
One of the criteria that the FHA and the Homeowners Loan Corporation used was the presence of what they call, quote, inharmonious racial groups.
Neighborhoods where black people live were always redlined. And so what that meant was it was exceptionally difficult to become a person who could get a traditional bank mortgage to purchase a home or a business property.
What that meant was that a black person, if they moved into a yellow or a blue zone, would change that neighborhood to a red zone. And all of a sudden that white person's property would lose huge value.
UW Law School professor Ian Main says the patterns of segregation we see today stem from these policies.
So a black person became a threat to white wealth, and it created hyper-segregation.
And it not only created disinvestment in older urban neighborhoods, it facilitated suburban development.
Because redlining maps sent government subsidies to the suburbs, urban communities were left with old housing and high prices.
In many cases, black people in deteriorating in urban neighborhoods were paying more in rent than white families were paying in the suburbs.
That means that blacks have been left out of the ability to build generational wealth.
What you have is basically a system of state-sanctioned apartheid.
And I remember as a kid, hanging out here, riding my bike or walking, and I never saw white people because everybody in the neighborhood was black. I didn't really understand it when I was a kid. I just said, it's just the way it is.
Reggie Jackson has lived in Milwaukee for most of his life and takes people on segregation tours of the city. We joined him to see the lines of segregation up close.
One of the best ways to see the segregation in Milwaukee is to visibly just drive along one of our main streets, North Avenue.
He says the Milwaukee River is one of the largest invisible borders.
Once you cross from the west to the east across the river, you know that you're not going to see a residential area that has anything other than white people in it for the most part. Developers not trying to build homes in this part of town. It's a really a sad situation to me.
Jackson says that in order to restore black neighborhoods in Milwaukee, investments in jobs and affordable homes are a must.
Clearly missing is the fact that people can't afford to become homeowners. People aren't making enough money.
Can't stop, won't stop. Gus T, Context of White Supremacy. Wednesday, July 2, 2025. So I have been told. We are, I can't even say slowly getting back into the groove of things, because I got back on Friday morning, June 20. It's July 2, so I have not even been back 14 days, right? We've already done 6 programs in 14 days live, and that does not count the 2 uploads of the programs that I was in the last day that I was in Milwaukee. I'm so proud. They say stand by your work. What are the 2 programs that you uploaded from your last full day in Milwaukee? June 18. Program number 1, Gus T at City Hall for the Milwaukee Police Department, giving us the lowdown on why they need to acquire facial recognition technology cameras in a trade for 2.5 million mugshots, mostly of Leroy, maybe even Mr. Jackson. You're a black dude, you running around talking about racism in Milwaukee, you might get arrested too. So I don't know. Mr. Jackson may have mugshot or 3, and he said something crass to a white woman. I don't know. But they said we're going to give up 2.5 million mugshots of mostly black dudes, and that was said repeatedly at the meeting, because who gets arrested in Milwaukee? People like Reggie Jackson. Not saying our guests, just people that look like Reggie Jackson. Black dudes. But that was number 1, and that is in the archives. And again, that's one, stand by your work, because it's been 10 days. I was looking feverishly. Hey, maybe somebody uploaded the video. Fox News was there. Other media outlets. It was at City Hall. It was important. Packed house. Maybe they'll upload the full video. As of yet, nope. So at this point, Gus T, all the way from Seattle, the only public record that this did happen and what was said. Program 2, same day, June 18. What did Gus T do his last day in Milwaukee? He left City Hall jogging. Sprint, 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 all the way to Whitefish Bay. It's not really that far. Milwaukee is kind of small. But anyway, all the way to the village of Whitefish Bay. to hear Thomas M. Jacobson give his talk on his book, Underdog, deals with the history of racism. A lot of the things we'll discuss today, history of racism in Milwaukee and Wisconsin at large, racist covenants restricting Negroes, and then his work fighting for the victims, family members of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, which was also racism, white supremacy, which he pointed out, including him suing Netflix on behalf of the victims. If I'd had more time in Milwaukee, I would have tried to pursue that too, but I mean, hey, thank God I didn't have to stay any longer than I did. Whew. Anyway, so both of those are in the archive, so that is 8 total programs. Whew. We have been on the grind and still here tomorrow, neutralizing workplace racism. Back, we had that last week, and then Friday, book club, Mary Kay Letourneau, cannot wait. Seattle, had to figure all that. 414 back. Yes, 206, love it. Child raping Mary Kay Letourneau. Now, today's broadcast, for those of you who I've said consistently, I know it's hard because we have approximately 2,500 programs approximately, and it might be more than that, but that's just, ballpark. So it's very hard to listen in chronological order to the programs. But the reason I say that is because of times like this where yesterday we had, and really even the past month, to listen to everything, how we got to this point. But yesterday specifically we had racist suspect Brent Arnold, who is a property owner in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. I have been saying White Folks Bay. That is the nickname for the area because they do not allow Negroes. You basically have to be a white person to own property in Whitefish Bay. So, apropos. Anyway, while I was out there for Thomas M. Jacobson's lecture in Whitefish Bay, I brought up the fact that, hey, the place where we're having this talk is notorious for not allowing Negroes. And that sparked, because he didn't bring that up in his talk, you see. So that sparked a lot of other dialogue. It was 2 Negroes there out of all of the folks present. And I don't think either of us owned property in Whitefish. And so after the talk ended, there was a white woman who came up to me and said, oh man, there's a pal of mine, maybe even a neighbor, and his covenant has got that exact language in it saying no Negroes here. You should talk to him and he'll give you all the 411. He'll give you all the information and let you know. So we had him as a guest on the program yesterday. Even in fact, I thought one of the best moments of the broadcast for me, not only his anecdote about swimming at Lincoln Park and then swimming up at Cedarburg, night and day. But also, when we got to talking about, now how serious are white people about replacing white supremacy with justice? Because the evidence seems that they are dedicated to maintaining the system of white supremacy racism. I said, Mr. Arnold, how many black people have you had at your residence? You've been a property owner in Whitefish Bay for a quarter century approximately. How many Negroes have you had over as a friend for 15 minutes, grab a quick cup of coffee, talk about the glory days of Brett Favre, whatever? How many Negroes have been at the house in 25 years? 0. Man. I said, wait a minute, you're supposed to be one of the good ones, Mr. Arnold. Now, wait a minute. It's not like it's no black people close to Whitefish Bay. You got a whole barrels and barrels of black people, boys and girls. In Milwaukee, you could walk from Whitefish Bay to Milwaukee and grab a few black people and come on over. We're going to play, boggle, have some crumpets, a snack. We'll have some cheese curds, and we'll talk about the good old days when they used to redline and all that's over with now because we have tons of black people. Come on over, Leroy. No. And we even pointed out, dang, he said his children had guests all the time. That means children don't have no Negro friends either. Back up, Leroy, back up. Any hoodles, all that's in the archives from yesterday, and even uploaded from my time in Milwaukee. One thing I told you, I was so mad. I visited the America's Black Holocaust Museum. I went, I took pictures. It was amazing. The Black Miss Andre on display there. And you know what else was on display? The fact that all of Wisconsin is basically one racially restricted region. I saw that repeatedly. I saw that at the University of Wisconsin, and just all over that got repeated in granular fashion. Like, let me tell you how few niggers there are once you set foot outside of Milwaukee County. Like, woo-hoo-hoo. What I said, watch out. Cedarburg if you want to. Anyway, but I went to the Holocaust Museum. Great. I took pictures. I shared online. I didn't even know Oprah Winfrey, she spent some of her formative years in Milwaukee. Who knew? I bet she doesn't brag about that. That's why. Anyway, but they had Reggie Jackson did a lecture at the museum talking about his forthcoming book, Midwest Apartheid. I cursed and kicked and stomped and griped, and they looked at me like, you know, what do we need to call security? And I calmed down. I went to the bathroom. I said, you know, you can't do everything, and literally I think I missed it by a day. That's why I had some added venom like filth flying all this way, and I done endured gun battles and tennis ball bombs and all that gruesomeness at the Sade Robinson trial and Jeff Dahmer tour and everything else. Got close to Cedarburg and everything, and I didn't miss the talk. Midwest Apartheid. That's part of what I'm here for, studying racism and racially restricted regions in this area, and I missed it. Oh, I was so mad. After I calmed down, folks at the museum staff kept an eye on me, make sure that I was not going to pitch a fit. Said, man, I'm going to do my best to compensate. I'll see if we can get him as a guest on the program. He can tell us a little bit what the book is about. Maybe some folks in the area will be lined up to get the book once it is ready for release. And I'll pick up some of the info that I missed on racism in the Milwaukee area that I would have got at the talk. The author was gracious enough to come and join us for the evening. In fact, you heard a little bit of Mr. Jackson in the intro. That was Wisconsin's PBS talking about some of that exact history, the racist covenants and not allowing black people to buy houses and get a quality place to live and stay in Cream City, Wisconsin. So glad to have him as a guest with us today. Joining us live, our guest, author Mr. Reggie Jackson. Let's see. Mr. Jackson, are you there with us, sir?
Sir, yes, I'm here, Gus. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for sharing a bit of your Wednesday evening with us. Wish I'd be saying this is the second time after I got to hang out and do the talk. We took pictures, got it on social media, but I was lame, missed it, and it was just like hours. If I had just seen it hours earlier, I'd have been there front row and center, but oh well, doing the best we can. Mr. Jackson, for listeners who may have missed out as well, might be their first time hearing from you, anything that you would like to share with us briefly about who you are and the work that you do out in the 414 area?
Yes, sir. I'm currently working on completing a book on the history of segregation in Milwaukee. The title of the book is Midwest Nice Apartheid, The History and Harms of Segregation in Milwaukee. The book looks at the history of how Milwaukee became one of the most segregated metropolitan areas in the country, and more specifically, it looks at the harm that segregation policies and practices over decades have harmed the black community and left the black community in very bad condition today. And I wanted to give people some background on how it happened, how Milwaukee became what it is today, a city that has extreme challenges for black people. It's considered by many here in the city to be the worst place in the United States to live if you're a black person. There's a lot of statistical measures that show that you don't want to live in Milwaukee if you're a black person. You're better off living anywhere other than Milwaukee. And here in the state of Wisconsin, most of the black people in Wisconsin live in the city of Milwaukee. Over 60% of all black people in the state live in the city of Milwaukee. And so once you leave the city of Milwaukee, you don't find a whole lot of black folks in many other places around the state. I've traveled around the state extensively over the last 20 years doing work teaching people about American history, African American history, diversity, equity, inclusion, all of that type of work that people are so afraid of now. I've been doing that work around the state. I've been in over 50 different communities all over the state of Wisconsin, talking to audiences, doing presentations, workshops, and facilitated dialogue, talking to and listening to people about their experiences related to race and racism around the state of Wisconsin. In addition to that, for 20 years, I was the head griot of America's Black Holocaust Museum. I started working there back in 2002 under the leadership of Dr. James Cameron, the founder of the museum. He and I became very close friends, and he became my mentor. And I started to do this work as a result of my relationship with Dr. Cameron, who people don't know survived a lynching in Indiana back in 1930. The photograph of that lynching inspired the song Strange Fruit that became famous when Billie Holiday performed it. And people that have seen the image of the lynching don't know that that's the most famous lynching photograph in history. They see Dr. Cameron's two friends, Abe and Tommy, hanging from a tree next to the courthouse in Marion, Indiana, and they don't realize that there was supposed to be a third person hanging from that tree. 60-year-old James Cameron survived the lynching. And as far as we know, he's the only known survivor of lynching we know that talked about the story of surviving lynching. There are probably others who survived lynching, but nobody wrote a book about it. Nobody started a museum to give that information to the world about the history of lynching other than Cameron did. And so my journey is directly related to his journey. My family moved to Milwaukee from Mississippi in 1973 when I was 7 years old. And I tell people I moved from Jim Crow to South to Jim Crow to North, and didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I was really probably in my early 30s before I started to really realize the history of segregation in Milwaukee and started to write about it and give lectures about the history of segregation in Milwaukee. And so over the last 10 years, specifically, I've been giving a lecture I call The Hidden Impact of Segregation, sharing with people how Milwaukee became so segregated and what it's done to Milwaukee's Black community. And I decided to take that presentation and what I've been sharing with people around the state, Gus, and put it into a book because I can't reach enough audiences just by doing lectures. So I decided to write the book. I'm currently not done with it. I've given myself a deadline of the end of August finishing the book. And part of the reason I'm not done yet is because each of the chapters of the book, I'm trying to include stories that people have shared with me, personal stories of people's experiences with racism and segregation here in Milwaukee. I don't want it to just be, a book that talks about redlining policies and practices and all those things that people are pretty familiar with, and not include the impactful stories that people have shared with me time and time again.
Fascinating. Wow. If it is all right with Mr. Jackson, I will take a moment to pay my respects to Dr. Cameron Jackson. Dr. Cameron. I think that is the museum had a fantastic experience. I have pictures posted from the day that I went. People told me, I think about a good month or maybe even greater than that in terms of in advance, telling me you got to go to America's Black Holocaust Museum. They have so much information. Dr. Cameron, I took pictures of him talking about the lynching. He survived. They had that right at the beginning of the museum, right when you walk in. He explains all of that, I think in Indiana, if my memory is correct. But he goes into great detail about all of that right in the beginning of the museum. Black history, or studying the history of white supremacy racism, is massively important. I had no idea that Mr. Jackson had those type of intimate connections with Dr. Cameron as well as the museum. See, got that cronyism. See, I thought they just they didn't even know Mr. Jackson, just brought him in on merits, and he's got a long relationship there. That now even more wish I had been able to catch it live and in person. Maybe he borrowed some of that spirit from Dr. Cameron surviving that lynching to do the work that you just explained in getting this book together. Midwest Nice, and the deadline is August. So I'm sorry.
Midwest Nice Apartheid.
Oh, I left out the most important word. Come on. Midwest Nice Apartheid. Thank you. Left out come on. But August deadline to get it done. I almost thought he was going to say, I've been fooling around, wasting time talking to bozos like Gus. I could have been getting chapter written tonight if I had been wasting time talking to you. Say, my fault, Brother Jackson. We're going to get you out of here quick. My fault. But he said August deadline. He said he's putting together everything he's collected traveling around the state of Wisconsin. Oh, man. Oh, man. He said he stepped foot out of Milwaukee County. Maybe he went to Cedarburg, Fond du Lac.
Yeah.
Chabot, no. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah. I have friends who live in Cedarburg.
Oh, my.
With me.
Oh, my Lord. Wait a minute, Mr. Jackson. One, for people who haven't seen you, you're classified as a black male?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Man. Give me, you said, do you have a story? You got homies in Cedarburg. Do you have a story?
Yeah, I actually have two sets of friends that live in Cedarburg. So for people not familiar with the Metro Milwaukee area, Cedarburg is in one of our exurban counties outside the northwest side of Milwaukee. So it's a very, very white place, exceptionally white. I think there are a total of less than 100 black people that live in Cedarburg. And I have a good friend of mine who was a professor of mine when I was in college, a white woman who lived in Cedarburg with her husband. And I visited with them many times. And I also have another set of friends, a young woman and her husband, who used to work with me in my company, Nurturing Diversity Partners, when I still did that work. And her and her husband moved to Milwaukee as a result of him being moved from the base he was stationed at in Michigan to a base here in Milwaukee back in 2007 or 2008. And they didn't know anything about the area. And so they were looking for a place to live. And they had two white people told them, specifically where not to live. And so they ended up buying a house in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, not knowing the history of Cedarburg or the demographics of it. And they've had some experiences there in Cedarburg. The husband, who, has now retired from the Army, told me that the first 2 weeks that he was in Milwaukee, the base he was stationed at was in the city of Milwaukee, and he would drive to the base from Cedarburg and then back to Cedarburg. And he said the first 2 weeks, he got a police escort once he got back into Cedarburg every day. The first 2 weeks, he got a police escort through Cedarburg. Not requested it, just got it. And they've also had some issues with their children in schools, in the Cedarburg High School, dealing with racism in the Cedarburg High School. One of their sons was downtown Cedarburg, just walking around on a very warm summer day, taking some pictures of crowds of people there. And someone called the police on him multiple times, and the police accosted their son, asking him what he was doing and where does he live. And he told them he lived in Cedarburg. And he pulled out his, identification card and showed them, where he lived. And they were like, oh, you do live in Cedarburg. So the police were surprised about that. And of course, when this kid's mom found out, she was very upset that the police were harassing her son for just being black in Cedarburg. And so there's a lot of other stuff they share with me that will be in the book. Those are some of the stories that I'm including in the book. The first chapter of the book, Gus, I'm calling Suburban Stories. So I'm interviewing people that live in the suburbs of Milwaukee, talking about experiences they've had. People that lived in Milwaukee that moved to the suburbs, people that moved to the suburbs from other places, or people who simply grew up in the suburbs and have always lived in the suburbs. It's very interesting when you come to Milwaukee. I tell people all the time, you come to the city of Milwaukee, it's a very diverse city. Milwaukee is the most diverse city in the state of Wisconsin. 33% of the residents are white, 39% of the residents are black, about 20% are Hispanic, about 5% Asian. So it's a very diverse city. But when you look at the cities and other places that surround Milwaukee, within Milwaukee County, there are 18 suburbs in Milwaukee County. 75% of the residents of those 18 suburbs are white. And then when you go out to the exurban counties, what we call the WOW counties here, Waukesha County, Ozaukee County, and Washington County, all of those counties are near or above 90% white populations. So you have a very diverse city surrounded on all sides by, very, very white communities. And so once you leave the city of Milwaukee as a black person, you generally don't feel all that safe going out to the suburbs. You're very likely to be, followed by the police, accosted by police, called names by white people. It's not a very comforting feeling for me when I leave the city of Milwaukee and go out to the suburbs. It feels pretty dangerous to me.
Man. Wow. I don't know. I'm laughing to keep from crying almost, Mr. Jackson. I will tell you this, before I get back to that word, danger. I went kayaking while I was in Milwaukee. We were on the Milwaukee River. Talked about that being an important dividing line. So to get to it, basically we went north past Brown Deer, up into Thinsville, right, almost close to Cedarburg. The day we were there, they had Lion Fest at the park in Thinsville. So it was a whole just mob of people.
Thinsville.
Thank you. They got all that Waukesha and all them wacky pronunciations. Woo! Thiensville. Is that it? Thiensville.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Okay, so we go out there, and they got Lion Fest. So they got all the amusements, and the crowd is just starting to pick up because it's morning. And I look around. Thinsville is about the same demographics that he mentioned before. In fact, it's worse because Thinsville, it's 86% white, 0% black. And they didn't have 0.9, 0.8, 0. Like 0. And that's exactly what it looked like. Oh, man. I looked around like, wow. I hope we don't have no kayaking troubles. Or not, because I knew I was going to be the only black person kayaking. But, woo, man, I was so thankful that we got back to Milwaukee. Like, exactly what he... And it is amazing. Brown Deer, just outside of Milwaukee, is about 30% black. Tons of dark people. You can look at this on the map. All you have to do is cross one street from Brown Deer into Thinsville. Watch out. If you whoa, escort, police, whoa, what are you doing here? Like, it is, wow. But back to what he said. Now, he said, once you step outside of Milwaukee County, you're a black person. Be careful. You're going to Cedarburg. Be careful. You're going to Fond du Lac. Sheboygan. They said, even the white people at the library there said, be especially careful if you're going way north in Wisconsin, like Green Bay. Be super careful. Now, all the folks talking about how dangerous that is, I think Milwaukee is dangerous. Like, I said that as soon as I got there, like, oh my. Like, I'm here for the Sade C. Robinson murder trial. She was killed in Milwaukee. I've been comparing this to Jeff Dahmer. Milwaukee is a dangerous place. And then if you're a black person and you step foot outside Milwaukee, whoa, you really... That's why I said, like, wow, I would be glad to never go back to Wisconsin. Just, wow, what a dangerous place. And then, Mr. Jackson, did you grow up in, like, the Milwaukee area? You're a native there and everything?
I was born in Mississippi. My family moved here when I was 7 in 1973. And I stayed through high school graduation. I joined the Navy right after high school graduation. I spent 6 years in the Navy. Was stationed in California for most of that time, and then moved to California once I got out of the Navy. So I was gone from Milwaukee from 1983 until 1993. And since I came back in 1993, I haven't lived anywhere other than Milwaukee. So most of my life has been.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. You said most of your life you've been in Milwaukee?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Badge of courage right there. Interestingly, the years he was gone, he would have missed the Jeffrey Dahmer murders, because that's like 1991, so maybe to come back for some of the trial, what have you, but how interesting. And I mentioned the Sade Robinson murder trial. You have that in common. Sade Robinson, her mom, they migrated from Mississippi to Milwaukee. Very common, even though it's a little bit later in the so-called Great Migration. I wanted to even rewind to something that you shared with us in your introduction when you talked about going around the state of Wisconsin. Now, you just talked about having your friends up in Cedarburg and some of the different anecdotes and what have you. So have you been to like Green Bay, Sheboygan, some of these areas where they have like 2 black people in total? Have you been to some of those places to talk to white people, like exclusively white audiences about racism?
Yes, I have. I've been to over 50 different communities around the state, Green Bay, Sheboygan included. I've been as far north as the Menominee Reservation, Wausau, Wisconsin. I've been out to the west of Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin, Platteville, Wisconsin. I've been to Janesville, which is in the southern part of the state, kind of in the center of the state, very far south. Janesville is used to be the headquarters of the white supremacists that lived in Wisconsin, neo-Nazi group that was here. Janesville was their base. I've been there, and I've done talks to mostly white audiences. I mean, once you leave Milwaukee, you're not going to find a whole lot of black folks in the state of Wisconsin. You have to go south to Racine, Wisconsin, which has a pretty sizable black population, and also the capital, Madison, has a small black population, not very large, but like I said earlier, over 60% of black people in the state of Wisconsin live in the city of Milwaukee. And so once you leave the city of Milwaukee, even in Milwaukee County suburbs, you're not going to see a whole lot of black folks in the suburbs either.
Whitefish Bay. No way. Absolutely not. This is shown in a variety of ways. I remember I was at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, and specifically, I was at the American Geographical Society Library. They have so much amazing material, and all white people, from what I saw on that day, June 18, all white people employed there. Neither here nor there. They pulled out all this amazing material, and we're going through the different ledgers and such of racism in the area. And I said what you just said, that they basically have all of the black people in Wisconsin are basically corralled in the southeast corner of the state, Racine, Milwaukee County. Like once you step out of there, And he said, "Oh wait, that's crazy talk, Gus. That's not true. It's black people in Sheboygan." Remember, we pulled up that Wisconsin map, and they have all kinds of ways you can shift it and look and just see where the black people are. Man, it was no black people like at all. And you can go county by county. We started going those areas, and it'd be like 10 black people, 7 black people, 3 black people. Like even the librarian at first, he said, "Wow, that's stunning to see how stark it is. Wow." Incidentally, Minnesota looked exactly the same. Shout to George Floyd. Then he said, "You know, Gus, some of these places where it's 7, 5, 4 black people, those are inmates. They count them too for the census, so it might look like it's." I'm sorry?
Yeah, that's a great point, Gus, is that a lot of these places, they claim they have a black population, but they won't tell you that all of those black people in that county are locked up in a state prison. They don't like to tell people that. They're counted as residents of those places. So they're actually providing financial resources to those communities by being incarcerated there. They're providing jobs at the prison, and because they're part of the population of that community, they get state and federal funding based on their population. And there are a lot of black men in particular that are locked up in prisons around the state of Wisconsin.
I'm laughing to keep from crying again. But see, doesn't that sound dangerous? That's why I said that it's Milwaukee is very dangerous. Tennis ball bombs. Who would have thought? Milwaukee is very dangerous. But I mean, Wisconsin is very dangerous. And I even, when I went through Dr. Cameron's museum, even at the beginning, the lynching that you talked about to kill him, we wouldn't have even had that museum maybe, But when I walked through the museum, I wish I had known I was going to bring this point up. Immediately, I would already had my pictures on my phone. But he has a crushing statistic about the incarceration rates of black males. You're a scholar. You'll probably have it in your book. Midwest Nice Apartheid, coming out. He'll have the deadline August, so it'll be coming out soon. But he has a staggering statistic in it about the points you just raised, where they say, I think the incarceration rate for black dudes generally in the U.S. is about 6%. Incarceration rate for white men in the U.S. is close to about 2%. The incarceration rate for black males in the state of Wisconsin, it is close to 13%. My jaw hit the ground. And I said, man, I need to get my plane ticket moved. Like, it is dangerous in Wisconsin. I didn't say, and I never have, since I've been there, I have not been saying it's dangerous to be a black person in Wisconsin. I keep getting hit with statistics like that. I was there for the C.O.W.S. Robinson trial, but I keep getting hit with statistics like that over and over and over. Even before I got those maps at the library, Mr. Jackson, I heard a lecture, Dr. Page, black male, he said the graduation rate at Milwaukee Public Schools, 35% for black males. And I mentioned that to Mr. Arnold yesterday, white man, racist suspect. He said, yep, that's about what it is right now. Matter of fact, I can even give one more directly for the C.O.W.S. Robinson trial. I looked at the jury, and you already gave us the demographics. Milwaukee is a majority black city. I didn't know that until I got there. I was stunned. It's 40% black. Wow. I looked at that jury.
I can tell you why you don't know that. There have been 2 TV shows produced by Hollywood about Milwaukee. Back when I was a kid, Happy Days. Actually, Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley were the 2 popular TV shows that were about Milwaukee. And I remember ever seeing a black person on Laverne and Shirley. I think the last season of Happy Days, the last couple of seasons, there was one black character. And then more recently in the 1990s, there was a show called That 70s Show, which is based on Milwaukee. I never watched the show. Every time I saw a preview for it, I never saw any black faces. I'm like, this is just another Happy Days of Laverne and Shirley tricking people into thinking black people in Milwaukee. In fact, Gus, let me tell you this. When I went into the Navy in 1983, and I was in basic training, but 80 other men, and everybody wants to get to know each other. Where are you from? Where are you from? I would tell people, I'm from Milwaukee, and they were like, no, you're not. I'm like, yeah, I'm from Milwaukee. They're like, you can't be from Milwaukee. There's no black people in Milwaukee, they would say. I'm like, man, there's a lot of black people in Milwaukee. I said, just because you don't see them on Happy Days of Laverne and Shirley doesn't mean that we don't exist. We're the largest demographic group in the city of Milwaukee. And so people don't know, Hollywood tricks them into thinking that, Milwaukee is all white place. And, you come here and you're shocked to see black people.
Large numbers of black people, like black people everywhere except in the jury box at the C.O.W.S. Robinson murder trial. But That is fascinating. On the one hand, I said, now Mr. Jackson being slick, because there were a whole lot of black people in that Netflix series about Milwaukee. That was one thought that came to mind, but that kind of makes the point in a crude way. And then on the other, I said, man, Mr. Jackson, I told you I went kayaking. I got a long list of, what I did on my visit. I did do the Jeff Dahmer tour. I did find Jeff Dahmer's apartment where it used to be. I did go kayaking in Thinsville. I did the Milwaukee Art Museum. I did find the bronze fawns on the Riverwalk. I took pictures and everything. So, yeah, don't be talking bad about Henry Winkler saying he tricked us into thinking there's nobody. But, I mean, that is massive, because it's not just you tricked us into thinking there's nobody. This is a majority black city, so much white flight. But the jury, that's what I was saying, they had 15 jurors, 3 alternates, 15 total, Sade Robinson trial. 12 of the 15 were white. Now, that was one reason I had to go to Milwaukee, because they did not show the jury selection on day 1, nor did they give the racial demographics of the jury on TV that I saw. So that was one great reason to go. Wow, that was staggering. And particularly to look at that jury, they had 2 black people out of 15 potential jurors. 2 black people. I spoke with Chris Ramirez. He's a reporter, black male reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and he did a whole big piece about this like a year before the trial, talking about how there's a long history of excluding black people from Milwaukee jurors. In that piece, he said, in Milwaukee, there is a discrepancy. Well, one, they pick juries based on driver's licenses, and then there's a discrepancy in the numbers of black males who have driver's licenses, so they don't get picked for juries. And it just went on from there. But that's, to me at least, it seems like Milwaukee, yes, it's horrendous to be black. Sade C. Robinson. However, there seems to be a gargantuan amount of data that in Wisconsin, black males in particular are targeted for jail, death, whatever, Jeff Dahmer, whatever it's going to be. Black males in particular. Do you see any data to support that, Mr. Jackson? Black male yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a story behind the lack of driver's license for black men, too. So for years in Milwaukee, what people would do is, if you got a municipal citation, say you got a ticket for jaywalking or littering or something of that nature, something very minor, oftentimes these will be kids that would get those tickets, right? And, if you have a 14-year-old kid that gets a ticket for, jaywalking, they're not going to run home and give that ticket to their parents so their parents can pay it. So what the state of Wisconsin did for years was they would suspend your driver's privileges for 2 years for failing to pay a municipal citation. So a lot of young black males had their driver's licenses suspended even before they got the driver's license because of municipal citations that weren't paid. And as a result of that, there are a lot of black men who don't have driver's licenses here in the state of Wisconsin, particularly here in Milwaukee. And that is directly related to the pool of jurors that, they select from. And it makes it so that, Sade Robinson's trial, like most trials here in Milwaukee, you'll see very few black people on the jury. I served jury duty on one occasion a number of years ago, about 20 years ago. In fact, I was the only black person on the jury. It was a medical malpractice case. I was the only black person on the jury, the only black person in the jury pool when we first met and were selected. And so that's very common here in Milwaukee. And even though black people make up just 6% of the population in the state of Wisconsin, Gus, we account for about 40% of the men that are in prison in the state of Wisconsin. And so if you really do the math, black men over the age of 18 are about 1.5% of the population in the state of Wisconsin. And we account for 40% of the men over age 18 who are in the prison system today. So it's very biased system. And I visited prisons here in Wisconsin doing research, and I was able to, see exactly what it looks like inside of these Wisconsin prisons. I have a friend who has been in prison since 1994 for a case where a grocery store was robbed by three dark-skinned black men, according to the witnesses who were robbed. Three dark-skinned black men walked into the grocery store with a handgun and forced them to open the safe, took money from the safe and left. Nobody was harmed at all. And so the police did an investigation, and somehow they arrested this guy who, the witnesses all described him as dark-skinned black male. One of the men they arrested was a light-skinned black male. And he's been in prison as a result of that trial since 1994, 1995. He was given a sentence of 180 years in prison for a robbery at a grocery store where nobody was harmed. Money was taken out of the safe. Nobody was even touched physically. And so he was found guilty, and he's fighting to get out of prison. He's been fighting. I've been in contact with him and his wife for a number of years, and he's been fighting to get out of prison, but they won't let this man out. He should have never been given a 180-year sentence for a robbery of a grocery store where nobody was harmed. I mean, you get more years than for this robbery than you get. He could have literally been a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer, and he would have gotten, less time in prison than 180 years he got for this robbery, which he had alibi witnesses that he wasn't there. His, public defender that he had did not call any witnesses on his behalf, even though he had multiple alibi witnesses to prove that he wasn't there. And so he's been rotting in prison for decades without the ability to get out.
Wow. That is, is it possible, if I missed it, my apologies, this privileged black male who has been in prison for more than this light-skinned black male privileged who's been in prison for more than 30 years? What is his name?
I don't know if you want me to share his name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can share it off the air.
Okay, that'd be good. I just would love to look at the case.
I can get you in touch with his wife.
Oh, okay.
She can share more of the details that happened.
Awesome. That would be great. Yeah, I would just for research purposes, certainly not for shame, because it sounds like he might be innocent of all this. Like, man, that's why I said Wisconsin is so dangerous. 3 black dudes robbed us. Any 3 black dudes will do. At least like any 3. Hey, I said at the beginning, Mr. Jackson, MPD, Milwaukee Police Department, they just told us at City Hall, hey, we'll clean up all this. Tell you what, we will get those facial recognition technology cameras, and then we'll have the exact ID of the 3 dark-skinned black dudes who did this, and then there won't be any more mix-ups. We won't have no whoopses, and we got the wrong Leroy, and this was Jamal. How about that? Facial recognition technology, will that do Milwaukee better, you think? And you live there, so what do you think?
Absolutely, it's a terrible decision because study after study have shown that facial recognition technology is very bad at recognizing the faces of black people. It makes mistakes constantly when it's used for black faces. It's not a reliable tool for black people. Something about our skin color throws this technology off. And as I say to people all the time, when you have technology developed by white people, bias is going to be built into it. And so bias is built into this facial recognition technology. I think it's shameful that the city of Milwaukee is going to start using that technology. There's going to be a lot of mistaken identity cases. And it's not going to be a good thing for the black community at all.
There were lots of white people at that. In fact, that staggered me a little bit as well, although not as much as some of the statistics about how not as much as some of the statistics about how white people in Wisconsin attack black males specifically, uniquely. But that meeting in a majority black city, it was mostly white people in attendance, like audience members, and most of them were in opposition to the facial recognition technology, and for the exact reasons given by Mr. Jackson. In fact, many of the white people who spoke, they even mentioned, hey, this trade where MPD gets these free cameras, they're giving up these mugshots, 2.5 million people, mostly black dudes get arrested in Milwaukee and apparently Wisconsin at large. So why do they want Biometrica, that's the company with the free cameras, why do they want all these pictures, millions of them, of black dudes? Why? Is this to do us a favor? Is this because they recognize, Mr. Jackson, you're right. We've done a poor job, and our cameras don't pick up people with dark complexion, and you just give us these mug shots, and we're going to tinker around. We're going to get everything figured out, and they are going to work. We're not going to have no more misidentification. It's going to work great, and Milwaukee will be better for it. Maybe. I don't know. Milwaukee police doesn't exactly have I don't know. Aside from the cameras, what's your impression of Milwaukee Police Department, which has a lot of black people working for them? Yes, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, they've done a good job over the last 20 years hiring black police officers. But the police department's reputation within the black community is very poor. There have been multiple cases going back to the 1950s where unarmed black men have been killed by police officers, and has caused, a great deal of consternation between the black community and the police department. Back in 2016, you saw a young black male by the name of C.O.W.S. Smith was shot and killed by a Milwaukee police officer. The police officer was a black police officer. He shot and killed a 23-year-old black male named C.O.W.S. Smith. And this is right in my neighborhood, just 3 blocks from where I live. And after he shot this kid, he eventually died. C.O.W.S. Smith died. Young people started to gather in the neighborhood, and there were confrontations between young black people and the police department. It led to, some fires being set at a gas station and a few other places in town. A police car was set on fire. There was civil unrest as a result of this. And it became national news. People thought Milwaukee was burning, even though there were only 8 fires set, all within about 8 blocks of each other. So they weren't spread out all over the city. They were concentrated in one specific area. But you didn't know that from the news coverage. And I had friends and family members from around the country calling because it was all over the national news. Milwaukee's on fire. And they were calling to see if I was okay. And I'm like, dude, it's fine. It's not nearly as bad as they would have you think. It reminds me of the coverage of the protests in Los Angeles that we've been witnessing over the last month or so, and how those protests are concentrated in a very, very small 3-block area in downtown Los Angeles. But if you watch the national news, you would think the whole city of Los Angeles, which is a huge city, was on fire. And so the same thing happened in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee's black community and the police department have had a bad relationship with each other for a long period of time. There was a young man by the name of Dontre Hamilton who was sleeping in a park, on the park bench downtown Milwaukee, just across the street from City Hall, years ago. And there was a Starbucks restaurant in the park, and the white workers in the Starbucks called the police twice complaining about this black man sleeping on a park bench, a public bench. First squad showed up, and they talked to this young man, Dontre Hamilton, and, they said, well, there's nothing wrong. It's a public park. He can sleep there if he wants to. And they went about their business. These Starbucks workers called the 911 again. A second squad arrived, and this officer was in the squad by himself. And he went over and he poked Dontre Hamilton with his nightstick and kind of pissed him off. And they got into an argument, which eventually turned physical. and the officer shot and killed Dontre Hamilton right there in that park downtown Milwaukee. I've gotten to know Dontre's family really well. His two brothers and his mother are good friends of mine. And they talk about the fact that they never got justice for Dontre being killed. So the officer that shot Dontre Hamilton, a white police officer, shot him. He was fired by the Milwaukee Police Department for violating protocol due to the fact that he believed that, or the police believed that Dontre Hamilton had some mental health challenges. And so there's a certain protocol for dealing with people in that condition. So he was fired for violating that, not for killing Dontre Hamilton. But before he was fired, he filed a claim with the police department saying that he was mentally stressed out and dealing with some very difficult issues, and he was able to get a disability claim filed with the police department. So after he was fired, he moved to Florida. He's been collecting disability claims from Milwaukee, from the city of Milwaukee, every year since he killed Dontre Hamilton. He's been collecting a check for his disability claim that he filed before he was fired by the police department. And that was a really, really big case in Milwaukee, too, a number of years ago. So there have been multiple cases like that over the years where black people, unarmed black people, have been killed by the police department, and the relationship is really, really poor. After Dontre Hamilton was killed, the Department of Justice, Federal Department of Justice, came to Milwaukee and did an investigation of the Milwaukee Police Department. They wrote a report which was never officially released to the public, but the ACLU of Wisconsin sued to get access to the report, and they issued a report themselves which showed the huge disparities in stops by the Milwaukee Police Department in terms of black residents versus white residents. And it showed very clear bias in all of the police districts in Milwaukee. In fact, you had districts where there are very small numbers of black people living in them. 3, 4, 5% of the district are black people, but, double-digit percentages of people that are stopped by the police, stopped and frisked, or pulled over by the police are black. And so there's a huge amount of bias that was related to the Milwaukee Police Department. They never released the full report to the public, but we got enough of the data from the ACLU's lawsuit that we were able to see just how biased it was. And so black people in Milwaukee are very aware of how biased the police department is when it comes to blacks. Unfortunately, just less than a week ago, we had 2 Milwaukee police officers who were shot. One was killed in the line of duty by a young black man as they responded to a call of shots being fired. This young man hid in some bushes and ambushed 2 police officers. Both officers were black. One of them, 32-year-old officer, was actually killed. He died, I think, 3 days after he was admitted to the hospital. The other one was in the hospital for a day and had surgery on his injuries he suffered from this young man shooting him. And so it's really been all over the news over the last week, this ambush of these police officers. And, people in Milwaukee are very upset. These police officers were doing their jobs. Both appeared to be really, really nice guys, well thought of by the community. And they were actually responding to a call outside the district that they were assigned to. They were assigned to District 2 in Milwaukee, and the call was in District 3, which was to the north of the district they usually work in. And unfortunately, this young man shot these police officers, and so that's, made the relationship between the black community and the police department, it's added some more, ugliness to it. People in the community are very upset that this young man shot these police officers. And it's just a really a terrible situation, unfortunately.
That officer, black male, I think he was only 32, Officer Kendall Corder, Corder.
Yeah.
I certainly have seen a lot of reports about that, and every time, or one to be 32, that is so young. Condolences to Mr. Corder's family and the other officers, although I think he did survive and everything. That's still pretty scary, I would think. By all the reports that I've seen and what I've said, I know some people say, hey, I don't support the police and they're corrupt and all that. I do know there are some black people who say, hey, racism is a problem and there are racist police officers. I will become a police officer to fight against that so that at least one of the people wearing a badge will not be some racist coming to beat you down or whatever, but will be somebody who is about correct intentions, practicing justice, maybe even help out some black people as I can wearing a badge. That very well may have been Officer Kendall Corder's intentions. So, man, terrible all the way around. That's one. Two, I thought, oh, man, I have seen this pattern before. You had, I think they said this is like the fourth officer shooting in Milwaukee this year, this calendar year, I think. So he might have been the first one that died. I think the others recovered. But, man,
yes.
If you thought they were going to get facial recognition technology before, and drones, I think I saw that just before the news of the officer shooting. They were talking about the drone program, which they already have. This is not no, hypothetical or whatever. Already got it. They're just talking about getting more drones and having even more technology to police this majority black city. I didn't see nothing about drones and facial recognition cameras in Whitefish Bay or Cedarburg, by the way. But
find those in place. And speaking of black police officers joining the force to provide that that kind of barrier, I have friends who are former police officers, retired police officers in Milwaukee who are black, and they tell a very interesting story about how biased it is and how there's this code of not snitching on each other, where even if you try to report racism or something of that nature that other officers are doing, you don't get anywhere with it. You can end your career by doing that. So they do it for the right reason, but they're not rewarded for doing the right thing, unfortunately. And you'll only hear that from retired police officers in Milwaukee. The ones that are active will not talk about it. They're not allowed to talk about that. But they know, they see the racism. But they're not going to talk about it until they're retired. And once they get their pensions, then they feel free to talk about these things. And so that's one of the things I'm writing about in the book, is the relationship between the police department and the black community, going back to a case way back in the 1950s where a young black man was killed by the police, and they planted a knife on his body, claiming that he had a weapon, and they put the knife in his right hand, even though the man was left-handed. They didn't know. They just assumed that everybody's right-handed for the most part. So they planted a knife in his right hand, and then come to find out he was a left-handed guy. And those officers, really nothing happened in terms of them being punished. One of them was so guilty about the fact that they had killed this young black man who was unarmed that years later he confessed to what happened and told on his partner who had murdered this young black man. And that was a big case in Milwaukee many decades ago. So there's several others that I can think of right off the top of my head where, unarmed black men killed by police in Milwaukee. And it's led to some very bad relationships between the community and the police department.
Wow. That is worth getting Midwest Nice Apartheid just to get some of those details. It even reminds me, that sounds similar to a case that Mr. Jacobson, Thomas Jacobson, talked about in his book in Whitefish Bay. Now, it might just be that they beat down a lot of black dudes in Wisconsin, so it's lots of cases like that. True. But I think it might have been the same because it's about the same time period. And, yeah, I'm going to have to go back to double check and see with his book. But, man, that sounds exactly like Dontre Hamilton. Now, you can see that's about 50 years, maybe even closer to 75 years between those cases. Wow. White people do not get fired, even for killing a black person. Maybe you get transferred to Florida with paychecks, but you're not going to.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's another series of cases not in the city of Milwaukee, but in the suburbs of Walworth, Tulsa. There was a black police officer who worked for the police department, I believe, for 5 years. And over those 5 years, there were 3 black males killed by the Walworth, Tulsa Police Department. He killed all 3 of them himself. He eventually left the Walworth, Tulsa Police Department, was hired by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department. So he is an active police officer right now, even though he shot and killed 3 black males during the course of the short period of time he worked for the Walworth, Tulsa Police Department. And I know the families of 2 of the victims of people that he killed. And, that ended up being really, really big news a number of years ago. We had some civil unrest related to protests about him not, being held accountable for the killings of a 17-year-old black kid at one of the local malls. And so, that's included in the book. And there's a lot of, very nuanced stories. The one I remember when I was a kid, though, Gus, and it's in 1981. I'll never forget this. There was a young black man, his name was Ernest Lacy, who worked in downtown Milwaukee as a painter. He was painting at an apartment building, and he left the apartment building to go get something to drink. And he walked back to the apartment building, and on his way back, he was stopped by 2 Milwaukee police officers who claimed he fit the description of the black man that they were looking for, who was accused of raping a white woman. Now, the description of Ernest Lacy and the guy that actually committed the crime, the description didn't match at all. But what they did, they put Ernest Lacy on the ground, on his face, and they lifted his arms above his head as he was lying on the ground, and he passed out. They put him in the back of a paddy wagon, and they drove off. And later that night, another young black man who was in that paddy wagon knocked on the back window to tell the cops, "There's dude in here. I think he's dead. I think he's dead." And so they pulled over and they found that Ernest Lacy had passed away. He was dead in the back of the paddy wagon. Nothing happened to the officers that were responsible for Ernest Lacy's death either. And so you had, marches and protests, justice for Ernest Lacy back in 1981, which mirrored the marches and protests for Dontre Hamilton after he was killed. And so these things is a pattern in Milwaukee that, black people who have lived here long enough know about these different cases and understand that it's a problem between particularly young black males and the Milwaukee Police Department.
Wow. Ernest, I'd never heard of that case. Well, obviously, I don't live near Wisconsin, so I had never heard of that case either. Ernest Lacy. Wow. That. And he raped the white. Yeah, he fit the description. Always light-skinned, dark-skinned, fat, tall, short, old. You fit the description. Yeah. Midwest Nice Apartheid. We are getting a copy of the book. Should be mandatory if you reside in Wisconsin, study racism in the area. Midwest Nice Apartheid. Mr. Jackson said he has a deadline for next month to get it all finished up. So we will have folks waiting, myself included, waiting to read, signing up to get their copies. Midwest Nice Apartheid. Do you have a definition of racism that you use in your book, Mr. Jackson?
Actually, there are so many different definitions of racism that I don't even like to use the definition because all of them from a variety of different sources. Sometimes they have some things in common. But my book is Midwest Nice Apartheid, and I use the definition of what apartheid was in South Africa. These very intentional segregation policies that became the law in South Africa back in 1948, and how those patterns and practices of segregation look very similar to the patterns and practices of segregation here in Milwaukee over a long period of time. And so I use apartheid instead of racism in the title, because I know that there are too many different definitions of racism, and it's very controversial about how people define it.
Tell me about it. Woo. Very controversial. And that, man, there's so many different definitions. That's why I often ask, so that way I'll know exactly what the person means when we talk about the term. You can let me know if I was in error in what I saw. I think on social media, there might be an image. It looks like you, and you're talking to what appears to me to be someone classified as white. And I've heard in some of the other, where you told us today, you've gone to give talks in some of these areas where sometimes it's exclusively white. When you, in my view, put on an amazing display of courage. Now, we are talking to someone who's in the Navy, so I mean, I don't know. Maybe you get all that training and such going through that experience. But wow, super courageous dude, Mr. Jackson here. So you go out to these parts. You're the only black dude for like miles, hundreds of miles around, except the inmates. And maybe they're going to put you there too. And so you go and you're going to talk about racism in this era, getting rid of diversity and equity, inclusion, and all of that. So you're going to talk to these white people, risking life and limb. What do you think, best case scenario, will be accomplished when you go to talk to these groups of white people, Mr. Jackson?
Well, let me just give you some background on why I go to those places. I'm invited to those places by white people. So, individuals at different colleges or universities invite me. Some other organizations, some, socially conscious people in those communities want to learn about the African American experience and learn some of that history. And so they invite me as an expert to talk about that history, African American history, as it relates to race and racism, because they want to know. They're very curious about it, Gus. I tell people all the time that, if you live in Wisconsin, you travel around the state. And when I was younger, I never traveled around Wisconsin at all until I was well in my 30s. You'll find that there are white people that live in the state that have never seen a black person in person before. And they're very curious about, us. And so they invite me to come to these places and talk. And I can say this, I give these people credit for having, the desire to learn, number one, and secondarily, having the kindness to invite me to those communities to talk about these things. I always tell them, I'm like, listen, I'm only one black person. I'm representing myself. I'm not representing all black people. I would joke quite often that, white people would often tell me, like, Reggie, I really wish that I had a black friend that I could talk to about different stuff. And I would joke that, like, listen, there's not enough black people in the state for every white person to have a black friend. It's just not enough of us to go around. So you have to learn about our experience in other ways other than just, having a black friend. Read the books that we write, read memoirs that we've written, watch documentaries that we've made about our experiences. You can learn about us very easily without actually having a black person in attendance. And so of all of these places I've gone, Gus, I have to say that I've been doing this for over 20 years, going back to the early 2000s with the Black Holocaust Museum, having me go and travel to different places to do talks. I've never had a negative experience, Gus, not one time. My brother, my older brother, he passed 5 years ago, but he was always scared for me when I travel to these places around the state. He would always tell me that I would need a bodyguard, and and then other people would tell me, like, Reggie, these white people don't want to hear this stuff. They're going to run you out of town. And I never experienced that. People were always very pleasant. And some of the most memorable experiences I've had in my life have been in some of these really white places, Gus, where people are so interested in learning about black people that they invite me to come up there and pay me to go and talk about black people to them so that they can learn some of our history based on, true history, not the foolishness that we learn in schools, but some truthful history, because they're very curious. And they're curious because they live in spaces where they don't have access to black people to talk to them about issues that are going on, about their experiences. And they want to know. They want to know the truth. And so they invite me to come as a truth teller. And, that's something I learned from Dr. Cameron. He he said, listen, we study history so that we can share it with people in a truthful way, because understanding the truth is the only way we get to the heart of how we got to where we are as a nation. We can't understand who we are as a country without looking at history in a truthful manner. You know, it was part of the reason he wanted to share the history of lynching and the details of the enslavement of black people in this country for 2.5 centuries, because he says you have to understand in history to understand why we are treated the way we're treated even to this day, and why, you know, it's so hard to talk about race and racism in this country. And for me personally, over the last, you know, number of years, the last 5+ years, you know, I had a company that I worked with that I started with a friend of mine called Nurturing Diversity Partners, and we would travel around the state of Wisconsin doing, you know, workshops, presentations, facilitated dialogue about race and racism, all these things, DE&I work basically. And we lost a contract that we were negotiating with the U.S. Marine Corps to do a session on unconscious bias, because Donald Trump passed an executive order back in September of 2020 banning that type of work. And so the negotiations with the Marine Corps ended as a result of that. And I've lost, my business partner and I ended up losing the business because nobody was willing to hire us anymore. You know, when Donald Trump came into office in January and started banning DE&I stuff. And so it's very difficult to do that work nowadays. There's still people that invite me to come and talk about different things. I did a lecture about the history of Juneteenth Day. I'm still doing these lectures about, you know, segregation, which people are still very interested in, Gus. Very, very interested, because these are things that they didn't learn in school. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what they learned in school. And that's what I've uncovered with, you know, research for the book about how segregation policies and practices created a two-tier system of home ownership, intentionally, you know, benefiting white people and leaving black people out in the cold. It was done very intentionally by several, you know, big institutions of the federal government, the Federal Housing Administration, the Veterans Administration also discriminated against black veterans when they came back from World War II and Korean War, not allowing them to get access to VA guaranteed benefits from the GI Bill, learning the role that the National Association of Realtors played in creating segregated spaces, which they finally apologized for. About 4 years ago, they issued a formal apology. Maybe 3 years ago, I think it was 2022. And these are things that people just aren't aware of. That's probably the reason I decided to write the book, because it's like a giant onion, Gus. There's so many layers to it. It's way more complicated than just, you know, some redlining maps or some racial restrictive covenants. That's part of the story, but it's way more complicated than that. There are a lot more issues related to it. And I focus my book on not just the history of it, but the subtitle for the book is the history and harms of segregation in Milwaukee. So I'm looking at how segregation developed, but I'm also looking at the harm that it's caused the black community over decades, which I think is just as important as the policies and practices themselves. It's what it did to the black community.
Context of White Supremacy. Retired member of the U.S. Navy, author. Book is coming out. Midwest, Nice Apartheid. Gus T, super disgusted, especially now. I heard so much information. Could have heard him live in person. Our guest, Mr. Reggie Jackson. If you have a question, *61 before, while we have him with us, a brief bit of time that we have left, *61 if you have a question that you want to sneak in for Mr. Jackson. I have kind of a two-parter based on your answer to my question. So you're going out to all these places. I've been to La Crosse, man. That's one. I've been to Wisconsin twice now. So like I say, I've been to Milwaukee County, surrounding areas, and then last time I was in La Crosse. Hopefully there will not be a third time. If I do, I'm going to stay with Mr. Arnold. So you said in going to these places, sometimes they paid you nicely. Bravo. You said you've never had a bad experience, that your dearly departed brother, our condolences, that he used to worry about you all the time, and Mr. Jackson, you're going to need bodyguard, and man, they go run you out of town. And he said, you never had that. They've always been super nice and just curious, learn about African American experience. So in 20 years of doing this and going to all these places, you black dude, you never had someone classified as white in the audience kind of get rowdy and push back on some of the things that you were saying? You didn't have that happen?
I had one instance. I did a talk for a religious organization here in Milwaukee. I was a keynote speaker for one of their national events. And after I spoke, I was in the area where they had food, just getting some food. And a man came up to me talking to me and told me that I was a racist. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? And he couldn't elaborate. He couldn't give me any details why he thought I was a racist. I said, I'm just sharing history with you, man. I said, the way you interpret it is up to you. There's nothing I can do about your interpretation of what I've shared. And so, I talked to the people that invited me to the event, and they said, oh, he's always like that. He's always, this very negative person, and he doesn't believe that, racism is real. And so we apologize for what he said to you. But other than that, which, that wasn't a big deal to me. I'm not surprised when white men in particular, push back against the ideas of racism, because they have a great deal of guilt about the things that they've done and the feelings that they have, and so they push back. But that's the only instance, and that was very, very minor. I mean, I literally forgot about this guy, 5 minutes later, and a week later, the people that invited me to the event contacted me to apologize for this guy, because he apparently went to them and told them I was a racist too. But other than that, I haven't had any negative experiences. I've had some great experiences. I had two experiences I want to share with your audience, Gus. So there's a little, very small town way up in northern Wisconsin called Wausau, Wisconsin. It's a 3.5 hour drive from Milwaukee. And the first time I was invited to Wausau, I'd never been anywhere near Wausau. I didn't even know where it was. I was invited to speak at a program, and I had a full audience, standing room only audience at this event. Everybody was white, with the exception of a handful of Native Americans who lived in the community. And there was a little white girl in the audience sitting in the front row. She's 9 years old, I believe, and she was writing in this notebook. I'm thinking the whole time, like, man, she's taking some copious notes. This little girl is on it, right? And so after the program finished, people coming up to talk to me afterwards, this little girl came up to me, Gus, and she said, thank you for the presentation, Mr. Jackson. I learned a lot. She said, I have something for you. And she handed me a piece of paper, Gus, with a picture of me that she had drawn in that notebook. So I thought she was taking notes, but she was actually drawing a picture of me, this little 8 or 9 year old white girl. And that really touched my heart. I'm like thinking, this little girl has never seen me, and she appreciated, what I shared enough to give me some feedback, and then to draw this picture of me and give it to me as a gift. That really made me feel great. And the second time I went to Wausau was actually last year, Gus, and I did a talk on the history of Juneteenth at that annual Juneteenth festival. And so I met a little boy, a little white boy, who I believe was 8 years old. He and his father came up to me after the presentation, and his dad said, Mr. Jackson, my son wants to take a picture with you. He said, okay. So I'm like, of course, take a picture. So the little boy came over and grabbed me around the waist and squeezed my waist like, G.I. Joe grip around my waist. He was really just so excited to take a picture with me. And so that's my 2 trips to Wausau. And so those 2, memories, just give me so much joy over the memory of this idiot at this conference who told me I was racist, because I'm thinking, there's some hope for somebody, because these young white kids appreciated me enough to want to be in a space and to be in close proximity to me. So I can't walk around, thinking that every white person is a racist or a bad person, because I had enough experiences to know that I've had great experiences with some white people. Now, I've had some bad experiences too, Gus, throughout my life. I've had, white people call me the N-word before. In fact, when I was in the Navy, I had a person who was in my chain of command that called me the N-word. And so I don't think there's too many black people that haven't had some negative experience with racism, but for me personally, I have to say that I've had a really good life. I've been very fortunate, Gus, and I've had some really good relationships with people. I made it a part of the fabric of who I am to get to know people from other groups, because I think that when you get to know people from other groups, that some of the stereotypes you have of those people go away. You just get to know them as individuals. I know a lot of white people. I have a lot of really very, very good friends who are white. And so, doing the work that I do, I encounter a lot of different people from a lot of different places and backgrounds. And I've been very fortunate to have, good relations with people because they appreciate the work that I do. They appreciate the honesty.
Oh, wow. Now that's fascinating too. And brilliant response from author Mr. Reggie Jackson about someone white calls you a racist. What do you mean? How am I a racist? Just asking questions. What? I presented evidence. Did I say something incorrect? Just asking questions and wait. And he said he didn't have any valid response. There you go. Ding, ding. Brilliant from Mr. Jackson. That's what. Did you have some more?
Yeah, I was going to say that's my typical response is when people say things like that, I ask them to elaborate. I ask probing questions. Can you tell me why you believe that? Why you said that? I want people to have to think about it, Gus, because when they think about it, they realize that what they just said is really, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And when they can't explain it to themselves, then they obviously can't explain it to me. So I use that technique of asking probing questions. And I've had, experience of people, standing there with a look on their face like, man, I feel really embarrassed because it's something really stupid to this black man. And so that's my approach. I don't get mad at people for doing that stuff. It doesn't serve any purpose for me to get mad. I mean, I had a presentation many years ago, Gus, where I spoke at what's called the South Shore Yacht Club in Milwaukee, this swanky yacht club on the south side of Milwaukee where all these very rich people hang out. They invited me to talk during Black History Month about, famous black women. So I picked, some famous black women and did a short lecture about it. And at the end of the lecture, this really, really old white woman came up to me, Gus. This woman was in her 80s, late 80s, in fact. She was there with her granddaughter. And she came up to me, Gus, and she said, Mr. Jackson, thank you for the presentation. This was wonderful. She said, you are a real credit to your race, Mr. Jackson. And, some people would have taken offense to that, would have gotten mad. I took it as like, listen, I know her generation considers that type of remark as, something positive. So I didn't get mad at her. Now, her granddaughter was very embarrassed, and, she turned as red as blood. She was so embarrassed that her grandmother said those words out loud. But I didn't take it in a negative way. I just took it as a compliment because that's what she meant it as. And so I understand, American history enough to know that the mindsets that people have are based on the generations that they come from, based on the predominant mindset at the time that they're growing up. That makes a big difference in how they see the world around them. And so I wasn't upset at this woman. I get it. I understand. That's the way she was raised. That's the society she was raised in, where, being openly racist towards black people and condescending to black people was the norm. One of the things that I teach, Gus, as I travel and talk about American history is that when we talk about Jim Crow, Jim Crow policies in the South, I tell people that we got to stop thinking about them as Jim Crow laws, because what they did is they literally required people to discriminate against black people. And if you didn't discriminate against black people, you were literally breaking the law. That's what Jim Crow laws were. Literally a tool to force white people to discriminate whether they wanted to or not. Because if you didn't, you were breaking the law. And so the other piece of that is the Jim Crow didn't end all that long ago, Gus. Jim Crow still existed during my childhood in Mississippi. We had, separate swimming pools in my hometown for black and white children in my hometown. And so I understand very clearly that those people that were the children of the Jim Crow age, many of them are still around. when I was a teacher, I was a teacher for 8 years in Milwaukee Public Schools, and I would teach the students during, when we talked about the civil rights movement. I taught them, like, listen, don't look at the adults, look at the children in these pictures. Look at those angry little white children that have the signs that we won't go to school with Negroes. Look at those kids in the pictures and ask yourself, where are those kids now? They're grown people now. Are they, the owner of the company you work for? Are they the chief of police in the town you live in? Where are they? They're still around. They didn't just disappear. And the mindset that they grew up with didn't just disappear because we changed some laws. So it's embedded in the psyche of people. And there are tens of millions of those people that still live in the United States that were around when Jim Crow laws were still in effect. Tens of millions of white people and black people, too, who were living when Jim Crow laws were the law of the land, requiring discrimination against black people. So we're not that far removed from that period of time.
Amen. Amen, Mr. Jackson. And just since he brought up the tens of millions of white people who were alive and in those photographs, Hazel Massery, she was one, Elizabeth Eckford and the Little Rock Nine. We read Elizabeth and Hazel. That's one right there. Hazel is still alive, white woman who was there and fist clenched, and Nick was in our school. And that's Arkansas, not Wisconsin, but same deal. But as he accurately stated, millions of those white people are still alive. The great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would make it mandatory to state, hey, white people are only 10% of the global population. So once we start talking about tens of millions, there aren't that many more white people on the planet because they're only 10%. Not even 10%, really, of the global population, which Dr. Welsing for decades submitted. That there is the motivating factor for all of this mistreatment of dark people. It's the three dark-skinned black dudes, they broke in. Anywho, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing?
Yes, I am, absolutely.
Oh, right on. How about that? What do you think of her theory of white genetic annihilation?
I think it makes perfect sense. As I was doing this DNI work, I kept reading in all of these different books and reports that, one thing you don't want to talk about to white people, you don't want to tell them that they are going to be a minority of the population in the U.S. because that really triggers them tremendously. They do have a great fear of no longer being a majority in this country. And so a lot of the stuff that we're seeing happening, all this stuff about immigration is because white people are afraid that they are no longer going to be the majority and no longer have control over everything in this country. So to me, when I heard those things when I was a college student from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, I was young. I didn't really get it. I didn't understand it. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It was hard to believe. But as I've grown older and have been in this space and kind of pay attention to what people do, not what they say, it begins to make a lot more sense that there is that fear, that absolute fear that white people have. And it manifests itself in so many different ways. And it's becoming clearer and clearer as we get, this new person in the White House that is showing, the fear that white people have. They're trying to cut off immigration for everybody except for white people coming into this country because they know that white people are not having enough children and they can't keep up with the growing population of people of color in this country. And obviously being, 1/10 of the global population, they know that. They see it every day. And they fear people from Haiti. They fear people from, Sudan. They fear people from, parts of Asia. And so it's absolutely a phenomenal, exercise in really studying the mindset of a group of people to understand, the basis of why they feel the way they feel.
Wow. The great Dr. Welsing, who before, really, a year before she passed away, accurately predicted that Donald Trump would become president, has it on record repeatedly, even people chuckling in the background because they thought it was folly to even think such a thing, much less say it out loud. at the time, and who is snickering 2 terms later. Har, 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 indeed. Our caller, Victim in New Jersey, did you have a question for author of the book? It's coming out. We're getting a copy. Midwest Nice Apartheid. Mr. Reggie Jackson, Victim in New Jersey, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Jackson. So woke, in the age of terms like DEI, woke, did you encounter, when you said you did encounter some, some pushback you gave the white man that called you racist. But when have people ever classified your interpretation, of black history and American history as woke? And if some white people, I'm speaking about white people, and if white people classified your your interpretation or your about black history, what would be your response, or was there a response if they would classify what you were teaching as woke? Did you experience that?
That's a great question, and that's something I put a great deal of thought into. And listen, this is what I tell people about the term woke. First of all, woke, the term is white people use that word. Black people don't call any of this. We don't talk about our history being woke. We've always been woke. We didn't have to be awakened after George Floyd was murdered. White people who had been sleepwalking were awakened after George Floyd was murdered, and they became what people refer to as woke. This is one of the greatest fears white people have, is of white people. That's why they turn the word woke into a 4-letter word, and they try to, admonish people for being woke, because for years, black people have been sharing our stories of the horrors that we've endured to white people, but they haven't listened, right? They haven't paid attention. And after, George Floyd was murdered, white people were much more interested in listening to our stories. They became curious about our stories. Not all white people, but a lot of white people did. And so I noticed this, just here in Milwaukee, a lot more white people became curious about the black experience, right? And so those white people crossed over that line. Black people and white people have been separated by this racial line that we didn't create. We've just been on the same side of it for, 400 years. And some white people crossed over that line to, gain some perspective and intelligence about our experience. They were curious. And so the white people that weren't curious, which is the majority of them, they look at those white people who began to share the stuff they'd learned and to ask questions of their white peers. They saw them as a threat. And so instead of just accepting that, these people are learning something new, maybe I can learn the same things, they rejected that. And they decided to, chastise those people by calling them woke and turning woke into something bad. When woke, the concept behind it, what white people started to get, I call it curiosity, not wokeness. The curiosity white people started to get, to me, was a very positive thing, because what that meant was that they had been lied to about American history their entire lives. They're finally learning some truth from the perspective of people of color, and they're interested in that, and they're believing it, and they're sharing it with their friends, family members, neighbors, whatever, and those other white people are mad about it. That's where the divisions in America come from. I tell people, we're talking about the divisions, how divided we are. I don't believe the divisions are related to politics. I don't believe the divisions related to anything other than a group of white people that became curious versus the majority of white people who have never been curious about learning, perspective other than their own perspective. And so when people talk about stuff being woke, that's some white folks' conversation. Black people, and you're not going to find a single black person going to say, I'm woke, because we've always been woke. We didn't have to wake up. We can't afford to go to sleep. We have to be vigilant all the time. So us learning about this history, these are things that, are not new to us. we weren't surprised when George Floyd was killed. White people were surprised. I can't believe that officer did that to this man. Black people were like, there's another one. He's just the next black man that they kill. And so that to me is how I respond to people when they talk about wokeness or not woke or whatever. And to me, it's a foolish conversation. If you expect me to have a debate with you about it, I'm going to just tell them, like, listen, man. I've gotten criticized for this by some people because they said it sounds very arrogant. I'm like, listen, I know too much about American history to have a conversation with somebody who knows nothing about it. I can't have a debate with you. I'm not going to have a battle of wits with an unarmed person. I just refuse to do it. And so people think that they can, push my button by saying the word woke. That doesn't do anything for me. I have a completely different perspective. I don't see it as anything other than some white people stuff. Wokeness is white people stuff, not black people. We're not woke. We're always awake. We have to be awake all the time. So when I hear the term woke, I'm thinking about white people who are curious. And instead of people just accepting that some white people are more curious than they used to be, they want to chastise those people, criticize those people, try to prevent those people from learning this history. They want them to believe the mythology of America being the land of the free and the home of the brave, with liberty and justice for all, when we who study American history know that's never been the case. Not one moment in American history has liberty and justice for all been an accurate statement of this country. It's just a myth. So thank you for that wonderful question.
Oh no, thank you for your response. I never even put it in that context. That woke it's really a battle between white people. If I'm getting that correct, is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a battle between curious white people and incurious white people. That's what woke is all about. White people that became curious, and believe me, they learned things and they started talking to their family members about it, their friends, their neighbors, coworkers, and that really made the white people that weren't curious about that really upset. They got really mad. I met a young woman who I wish I had time to tell her story, a young white woman I met in La Crosse that told me about how her curiosity ended up forcing her to lose her relationship with her entire family because she brought up the name Trayvon Martin at Sunday dinner. And so, that's always going to be the perspective I have, is that it's a battle between white people. Black people are still on the same line, on that same side of the line we've always been on. We know our history, and we don't need, to have people teach us our history. We know it pretty well. We may not know all the intimate details, but we know our history pretty well because we've experienced it. And so we don't need to be woke. White people, that are curious became what they considered to be woke. They came up with that term. We didn't. We would never call it woke.
Okay. Next, just one more question, Gus. When you're talking to white people, first, reparations, because this has been a conversation that people have been having, demanding reparations. Have you ever brought up reparations in your discussions with white people? And if you have, what was their response?
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about reparations quite a bit. And white people are generally, that's a word you mentioned. If you want to silence a crowd of people, mention that word and people will be as silent as a mouse. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. And I've said this for years, and I say this to my black friends. I have some black friends here in Milwaukee that are very active in the reparations movement, very active in C.O.W.S, the national, group that's fighting for reparations. And this is my belief about reparations. And I think I'll believe this till the day I die, is that us asking white people for reparations, asking this government for reparations, is the same as chickens going to the head fox and telling the foxes to stop eating the chickens. You're wasting your time. It's part of the nature of the foxes to eat chickens, and you can go talk to the leader of the foxes that he's never going to tell the rest of the foxes to stop eating chickens. So us going to the federal government and asking the federal government to even have a conversation about reparations, a conversation about studying reparations, House Resolution 40, We've been fighting this battle just to have a conversation about studying reparations, and we've not made any real headway in, decades. So I don't believe that it's a realistic goal. It's something that, if we lived in a just society, it wouldn't even be a conversation. We would have gotten reparations like many other groups have over the years. I can give, several instances of reparations given to white people. Everybody knows about the Japanese internees who received reparations checks many years after their internment ended. Most of them had already died before they got reparations. But there was an interesting case in New Orleans in the late 1890s, early 1890s, where a group of 18 Italian men were actually lynched by a mob there because they thought that that community was responsible for the death of a police officer. They lynched these 18 Italian men. The Italian government was very upset that these Italian men had been lynched in the United States, and they demanded reparations for the families of those 18 men. And they paid $25,000 to the families of each of those men that was lynched in New Orleans. And so, reparations are not something that's new. America has given reparations numerous times to different groups of people. A lot of remuneration and reparations have been given to Native American tribes because the U.S. government consistently broke treaties with them. And so it's not something new, but in order to even acknowledge reparations, I think it requires America as a nation to admit how terrible they've been to black people, to admit that they have done horrible things to us and continue to do horrible things to us very intentionally. And they're not willing to admit that. You have to be willing to admit wrong before you give reparations. And I don't think America is ready to admit wrong. I think about, the fact that the Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, during the wave of mass lynchings of black people, refused to do anything. The House of Representatives passed the Dyer Act in 1921, I believe it was, to make lynching a federal crime. The U.S. Senate refused to follow suit and pass a similar law. And they finally got around to passing a law in the Senate in 2021, the Emmett Till anti-lynching law, which was, I told people okay, that's pretty useless because, the day of, hundreds of black people being lynched across the country yearly are long gone. You're passing this law, which has no measurable impact on anything going on in the country right now. It's symbolic. But James Cameron, my mentor, Dr. James Cameron, was invited to Washington, D.C. in 2005 when the Senate issued an apology for never passing an anti-lynching law. And I remember him coming back and telling me how disappointed he was that when he went to the Senate chambers to, hear this apology from the Senate, that there were only about 3 or 4 senators in the room, including Barack Obama, who was a senator at the time. And he said it really was, they were pretending to apologize. They were not sincere. They were not even in the room. The handful of people that signed that apology, most of them were not in the room. So, I take the idea of reparations as something that's like, in my opinion, I think it's a pipe dream because in order for America to live up to the idea of reparations for black people, they have to admit what they've done to us. And that is the exact opposite of what they want everybody to believe about this country. What they believe, what majority white people believe about the history of America, it creates a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance because they're like, no, I can't believe that George Washington, was a slaveholder, or that Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder. I can't believe those things. White people don't want to believe those things about their so-called founders. But if you were going to have a conversation about reparations, you're going to bring up those things. That's going to be part of the conversation. And it makes white people dizzy to hear those things about, their history. They don't want to hear it. I wish they would. There's some white people that are willing to hear those conversations, but I don't think the masses are. I don't think that we have enough intestinal fortitude among members of Congress to even pass a resolution to study reparations. And so, I talk to white people about it all the time, but it's not a conversation most of them want to have. Even the ones that are curious don't want to really have that conversation. And people have poisoned the conversation about reparations, acting as if, reparations will be, give black people a big check. All they can do is go and buy a bunch of Nikes and, stuff like that. It's just foolishness, the conversations we have, very disrespectful conversations. Reparations don't have to be, some distribution of cash. Reparations could be something as simple as giving black people a home for free, college education for free. Those are forms of reparations that would actually repair some of the damage that was done to us. Reparations is about repair. And we tend to forget that when we're having those conversations about repairing the harm that was done to black people. We haven't repaired the harm that was done to black people. We're not doing a whole lot to repair the damage. We're just seeing that damage, passed down from generation to generation. The trauma.
Victim in New Jersey, did you get your last question in? Was that it, sir? I'll assume he might have got his last question in. Much obliged, victim in New Jersey. I guess I'll get my last two questions in the time that we have you, Mr. Jackson. I guess one, in your response to victim in New Jersey, you said, I don't have time today. I hope it's in the book, Midwest Nice Apartheid, but you said that there was, I believe it was a white woman, and you said that she brought it up with her family. She was one of those, I guess, so-called woke white women, and she was bringing up Trayvon Martin with her family, and she ended up losing her whole family. You said, was this a La Crosse white woman where this happened, or?
Yeah, I believe it was in La Crosse. So I'll give you the quick version. So this young white woman had Sunday dinner with her family every Sunday. It was a family tradition. Her mom, her dad, her brother and sister, they always had Sunday dinner together. Mm-hmm. And on one particular Sunday, right after Trayvon Martin was murdered, she was very upset about what happened to Trayvon Martin, and she brought it up over Sunday dinner. She said that her father got really upset with her and said, don't you ever mention that N-word's name in my house again, and just started cursing at her, yelling at her, just demeaning her in every way possible. And she said she was sitting there hoping that, her mom or her brother and sister would intervene on her behalf and stop her dad from doing what he was doing, but nobody did, and she sat there and she just had to take it. And she said after that, her relationship with her father was gone. She had no more relationship with her father after that. The way he treated her, she didn't have any relationship with her mom. She barely had a relationship with her brother and sister because nobody came to her defense. And it showed how hard, and I've said this to black people, how hard it is for white people to do the right thing. They lose relationships. They're risking relationships. When you try to do the right thing as a white person and you speak out against racism, you're risking losing close relationships with family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers, whatever. It's a great risk that white people are taking by trying to do the right thing. And for this young woman, she lost this most important relationships in her life simply because she felt empathy for the family of Trayvon Martin. And so I don't know if I'll include that in the book. I think I probably will because it shows how hard it is to, cross that line and to do the right thing as a white person. It's not as easy as people think to be an anti-racist. And she was just simply, expressing her views that she thought it was wrong the way, that jury acquitted the man for, killing Trayvon Martin.
Wow. I hope that goes in the book, Mr. Jackson. That's pretty juicy. And just for context, La Crosse, now some of these towns like Cedarburg and Thinsville, these are kind of smaller areas. La Crosse is nearly 52,000 people. Now that's not as big as Milwaukee or some other places, but that's not the little that's over 50,000 people. That's a lot of folks. That is 87.2% white, 1.8% black in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which, according to the metrics of James Lowen, and even the author of Buried in the Bitter Waters, The History of Racial Cleansings, that would qualify as a racially restricted region because there's so few black. That's one of those, you might have like 100 black people in a place with like 52,000 people, like 200 black people maybe, if it's 1.8, like, woof. Anyway, that's for context of where this happened. I will say, just my view, I've learned so much from Mr. Jackson. I've seen a pattern where many times, I don't even use the word anti-racist, I don't even call myself that, but I've seen so many occasions where people classified as white, we never, for the most part, call a white person racist. All of the time, white people will get labeled as anti-racist. I say, wait a minute, what are their anti-racist street creds? And that chest will look mighty bare. And I will have to say, for a white woman to say, hey, I think the Trayvon Martin verdict might have been bad. Can you pass the peas? That does not qualify as anti-racism work. Like that, and I mean, because I've seen it happen, sometimes you just have one racist and another racist, and they just have a different opinion on the plantation, how the slaves should work, which slaves we should buy, which slaves we should sell off, that type of a thing. That doesn't mean that one of them is anti-racist or even against slavery. It just means that we have a difference of opinion. She didn't, say I'm trying to hook up black people or get Mr. Jackson out for a talk, or, I mean, unless it's a whole lot more. You did say you gave us the abbreviated version, like unless it's some really impressive tidbit, she's trying to get Ernest Lacy like a plaque to commemorate what happened to him, and a scholarship so his relatives can go to University of Wisconsin for free. Like, just saying I don't agree with the Trayvon Martin verdict, like, okay. And even if anything, for me the lesson for that is, wow, dedication to white supremacy racism is strong. How strong? In fact, what does Neely Fuller Jr. said all the time? You say, if you are white, you cannot be ignorant about racism. That's what he says all the time. It is not all these white people saying, I didn't know, and that is a monster lie. That's what that illustration shows me right there. What? You don't think Trayvon, you see we live in La Crosse? We don't have no Trayvons in La Crosse, and that ain't no accident. What is wrong with you? We did all this effort to raise you up in La Crosse like a prominent white woman, and you're going to be saying something like that? I'm disgusted. I don't even want to eat anymore. Get out of my house. That's what I'm like. You cannot be white and he said the whole family, it seemed, this opinion was unanimous. There was not one voice of, oh no, wait a minute, you don't talk to her that way. What do you mean? It's a shh.
Yeah. Gus, can I share with you just very quickly about the cross?
Yes, sir.
I've been to the cross multiple occasions doing work with the community there. Was invited there to do work related to, learning about African American history. We had a group of people that put together a very diverse group of citizens from the cross to come and learn how to have facilitated dialogue about difficult topics. And so we train people there as our facilitators to have these types of conversations. And that was where this young woman shared that story during one of these, conversations we had. But interestingly enough, one of the young men that was a part of that we trained, his name was Shundell Spivey, young African-American man, very dynamic young man, young leader in La Crosse. He was actually just elected mayor of La Crosse in the last election. And I'm really proud of this guy. I mean, super duper smart young man. I think he's going to do wonders as the mayor of La Crosse. And, of course, first black mayor in the history of La Crosse. But the other piece about La Crosse, Dr. Campbell was born in La Crosse in 1914. His father was a barber. And so back in the early 1900s, all of the master barbers in the United States were black men. And so if you wanted to learn how to be a barber, you trained under master barbers. And so people came from far and wide to go to La Crosse, Wisconsin, of all places, to learn to be barbers under these master barbers who were black men. And Dr. Cameron's dad wanted to become a barber, and he trained under some of these master barbers from La Crosse. So La Crosse actually has a pretty interesting history when it comes to, the connection between Dr. Cameron and, what's going on in La Crosse now. The fact that, I got into this work, doing this work, because of Dr. Cameron, got to know a history of him coming from La Crosse, and did work in La Crosse, his hometown, years later. And now one of the people that I trained to be a facilitator has been elected as the mayor of La Crosse. That's something I'm very proud of. The fact that we were able to help this young man learn how to have conversations about difficult topics. And I'm sure he used some of that training, in the course of the work that he's done over the years to get into a point where he is now, running the city of La Crosse. He's a very dynamic young man, John Dale Spivey.
Now that is something to be proud of. Mayor of La Crosse. I don't even have that many black people in La Crosse. I'm sure he has got to be. I mean, it would have to be all kinds of spectacular. He would have to be the first black elected mayor of La Crosse, Mayor Spivey. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, the first.
Wow.
And I think there's maybe 1,500 black people in La Crosse total. It's a very small black population. And they elected a black man as their mayor, which when I heard about it, I was surprised they elected a black mayor, but then when I heard who it was, and I knew that it was this young man that I knew, I wasn't surprised because he's a very dynamic young man. Just really a great guy. And I think he's going to do a wonderful job as the mayor of La Crosse.
Mayor Shondale Washington Spivey, something to be proud of. Mr. Reggie Jackson, guest author, he had a hand in that for sure. Before we let you get back to writing, so he hit that deadline. He's not going to blame us. I'm messing around and wasted my whole Wednesday with Gus and them. I could have finished 2 chapters. When you talked about white people, at least some of them, you even connect Ernest Lacy. Say it 2 times. I just learned about that today. You said that one of the white officers some years later, he felt guilty and he came back and kind of spilled the beans on what happened with this case and how Ernest Lacy ended up being killed. Rapist suspect. I hear that frequently in terms of this notion that white people feel guilty about racism, the mistreatment of black people. And I don't know. I mean, I could go current or I could go, Milwaukee history in general, even Ernest Lacy. But if I go current, I sat at the Sade C. Robinson murder trial for 2 weeks. Max Anderson, convicted murderer, racist. He didn't even take the stand. He pulled a Diddy. They didn't call a single witness, and he didn't take the stand. Convicted. The jury deliberated for, I think, a little less than an hour. It was super quick. By the time they filled out the forms and sat down, good, guilty, let's ride. He didn't even acknowledge, where is her skull? 19-year-old black teen. She was just about to graduate Milwaukee Area Technical College. He was 33 years old, gargantuan age difference, and he lived close to Cudahy, racially restricted region. They don't even allow black people to live down there where he goes to Wanamont Park. Long history of that. He was not guilty, or excuse me, he was convicted guilty for sure, but he was not. I feel bad about this. Let me at least tell her mom where the skull is so that they can. There was none of that. Parents, contrition, remorse, none of that. And there's so many instances of this throughout. Even Jeff Dahmer, like I said, that Netflix special does not show me no ounce of, man, we sure do feel bad. We could have caught Jeff Dahmer a long time ago. We just let him prey on all of those black people in Milwaukee and non-white people, the Laotian boys, because he got his brother too. We just let all that go on for all that time, and we could have stopped it a long time ago, but we just don't really care about niggers in Milwaukee. It seems like there's a lot of evidence that in total, white people do not feel guilty about practicing racism. What do you think, Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There's a great deal of empathy for black people simply because they don't want to believe the things that they've done. You know, they don't want to believe the history. And so if you force yourself to not believe the history, then you're not going to feel any level of sense of guilt or anything about it, because you're like thinking, you know, black people just making this stuff up. You know, we haven't done this stuff to black people. But one thing I want to correct, though, Gus, is a case where the police officer finally confessed years later. That was not the killing of Ernest Lacy. There was a different case in 1958. A young black man by the name of Daniel Bell was killed by the police, and they planted the weapon in his hand. And that was the case where the officer years later in 1975, I think, admitted that his partner did shoot Daniel Bell in the neck and killed him, and that they planted a knife on Daniel Bell to make it seem like it was self-defense. So that was a case, Daniel Bell, not Ernest Lacy, two different cases. And that was in 1958, the Daniel Bell case.
Much obliged. Thank you for the correction, Mr. Jackson. Daniel Bales. That's the one where we got a confession after some decades. Not Ernest Lacy, who they broke in half, it seems, and threw in the back of the paddy wagon suspected. Did I get that correct with Mr. Lacy?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, very similar to the case of the young man in Baltimore who, you know, died in the back of a police paddy wagon, Freddie Gray. Yeah, so the Ernest Lacy and Freddie Gray cases have some similarities. But the Daniel Bell case is one that most people in Milwaukee have never heard of, the case of Daniel Bell. I mean, it was in 1958. It was a really, really long time ago, but the fact that the officer who was a partner to the one who murdered Daniel Bell actually felt so much guilt that he finally confessed and told, you know, what they really did. You know, Daniel Bell's family had been looking for justice. They actually filed a lawsuit against the police department in maybe the 1980s, I think, and they won some form of payment for that death. But you know, it just shows you how these cases, 1958, in Daniel Bell, there was another case in the 1960s where a young black man was killed by police and, you know, accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail, even though, you know, there was no evidence that he did that. And then in case of 1981, you had Dontre Hamilton being killed, trying to kill. Yeah, I should remember this because they have a rally for that every year. 2014, and Dontre Hamilton was killed. And so I guess I'd like to really thank you for reaching out to me, sir. You know, I'm working to finish this book. I'm working to complete these interviews to add these different stories to the book and make it a more interesting book. And I am so excited about the book. I've been doing what I call previews for audiences across Milwaukee, talking about the book. I actually have a preview coming up in 10 days. I'll be doing a preview of the book, sharing a few things that I've uncovered in the research for the book and trying to, you know, uncover, you know, hidden nuggets that people don't know about, and to correct, you know, some myths that are out there about the history of black people in Milwaukee. And so, you know, this is my passion. I've become the segregation guy kind of by accident. You know, I studied segregation, but never really intensely studied segregation in Milwaukee until about 10 years ago when a reporter from CNN contacted me and did an interview with me and came to Milwaukee, and I gave him my segregation tour, and he wrote an article on CNN's website. And after that, everybody and their grandmother was asking about segregation, so I started to study it in more depth and started to do presentations about it. And, you know, people really, really love that presentation I've done I've done some version of that presentation. They're called The Hidden Impact of Segregation. Somewhere between 200 and 300 times I've done that presentation. So I said, you know what? I'm reaching a lot of people with these presentations, but I can't reach everybody. Let me write a book and see if I can reach a wider audience. And so that's why I decided to write the book. And it's been a lot of work. I mean, it's really, really hard. I never knew how hard it would be to write a book. But it's something that I feel very proud of. I think this will be, once I'm no longer around, this will be, an important part of my legacy of the work that I've done over the course of my adult life. Something I'm very proud of. And I just saw that, no one knows about the history of segregation in Milwaukee. Everybody knows Milwaukee is one of the most segregated places in the country, and people write about Milwaukee all the time, but nobody decided to write a book specifically about the history of segregation here. I said, since nobody else has done it, let me do it. And, it took me a while to come up with a title that I thought was a good title. And so I think about the fact, when you come to Wisconsin or other place, or even, anyway, Midwest Minnesota, they have this saying in Minnesota, they call it Minnesota nice. Here they call it Midwest nice, where people are just really friendly. And I found that, that's not always the case. White people are not always that friendly here. I have a nickname for Wisconsin. I call Wisconsin Mississippi because it's a very racist state to live in, Gus. And so I wanted to write the book to uncover the damage that was done to the black community in Milwaukee and why we have the challenges and struggles that we have as a community. People don't know. People in our community we blame ourselves oftentimes for the conditions in our community. We didn't have anything to do with creating the conditions that are conducive to all of the challenges we have. We didn't do it to ourselves. When black people say, we're our own worst enemies, I want to just slap a person when I hear them say that. They don't know the levels of horrible things that white people have done to us and continue to do to us with no conscience. I mean, they just do it and just, they don't even think about it. It doesn't bother them at all. And it's what Dr. Cameron spent his life doing, trying to get that history out there. And this is what I do. I'm following his giant footsteps.
Well, that's 2 shout-outs for Dr. Cameron. If you go to Milwaukee, number 1, it is dangerous. Don't go outside after dark. Like that's what I did the whole time I was there. Man, I stayed next to McKinley Marina, which is east of Milwaukee River. Mr. Jackson had that all in the introduction. Like, hey, once you go east of the river, not no whole lot of black people. Whitefish Bay is east.
West of the river. West of the river. On the east side of the Milwaukee River, between the river and Lake Michigan, all you're going to see are white people. People say they're scared of down Milwaukee. I said, listen, if you're scared of white people walking their dogs, you better stay away from downtown Milwaukee, because that's all you see in downtown Milwaukee. White people walking their dogs. They're literally getting ready to build a dog park in downtown Milwaukee, Gus. A dog park.
I seen the pickleball courts, man.
Listen, they're spending $760,000 to build a dog park in Milwaukee downtown. $760,000. That's how much white people love walking their dogs in Milwaukee. And I said, you know what? If you're afraid of white people walking their dogs, man, you better stay away from downtown, because that's all you're going to see.
Now, you didn't think they were going to spend $1 million to fix up Milwaukee Public Schools for Leroy now, or get Leroy a driver's license. Now, come on, Mr. Jackson, we gonna get this dog park next to the pickleball courts that I saw, and we gonna have a grand time. We come down, so we do a little kayaking. We go see the Brewers get a win, and man, come on. Anywho, if I have to go back to with War One, make sure you go to America's Black Holocaust Museum, Dr. Cameron. I went to, when I stayed next to McKinley Marina, so lots of white people, Whole Foods right down the road on Prospect. Even there, I said, I don't go out after dark And literally days after I left, what did I see? Takedown at Bradford Beach. Oh my goodness, they're acting a fool at the lakefront. And they had the police, and they showed them they were tasing black people and all that. I said, see? Mm-hmm. And some of these, it was broad daylight when they were doing all this. I said, nope, I'm good. Milwaukee is dangerous. But if you can survive all that, America's Black Holocaust Museum, definitely if you're in town the next couple of weeks or so, go see Mr. Jackson's previews for the book, Midwest Nice Apartheid. So you'll be waiting with bated breath, just like we are, to learn more about all this racism in Milwaukee and how black people have been abused and kind of stuck in these isolated areas in the state of Wisconsin. But thank you so much for sharing a bit of your time. Again, I'm still bummed I didn't get to see the talk in person, but if I come back, I'll have a copy of the book, I'll get it signed, and I will sign up to do the Segregation Hidden History Tour. So I will definitely, if I have to come back, do another tour of duty, you already know I will let you know in advance, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah. Can I share two resources for your audience, Gus?
Absolutely.
So when we worked to reopen America's Black Holocaust Museum, we didn't have any money. We were literally dirt poor. We had no money to open a museum. So what we did was we said, well, you know what? We can create a virtual version of the museum. So we created America's Black Holocaust Museum Virtual Museum online, and it is at abhmuseum.org. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of information about the Black Holocaust there. It's a great resource. Teachers from around the country have been using it over the course of the last 11 years. It's been online for 11 years now. It's a great resource for people who want to learn, things about American history as it relates to our people, but also current events. We have a portion of the website, the virtual museum we call it, which talks about current events that are happening around the country. And then one other resource related to me specifically, I started writing on Substack about a month and a half ago, and so I'm building an audience on Substack now. You can find me on Substack, and that's where I, just write articles about my views on things that are going on in the country. And I always use that platform to provide historical context for things that are going on nowadays. And so I have it's free subscriptions right now. I'm building a subscriber base. Over the last month or so, I've now gained about 50 subscribers. It's new, so people don't know it exists. And so I'm hoping that more people who want to hear kind of my viewpoints can go to Substack and look up Reggie Jackson, and they can learn more about kind of my perspective on these things related to, race and racism. And so my homepage on Substack is Reggie Jackson, and my catchphrase is this: say it straight or it comes out crooked. That's my catchphrase for Substack. And so that's my philosophy on talking about issues. Say it straight or it comes out crooked. And Gus, man, I really have enjoyed the time with you. I'll make sure that I get familiar with the work that you've done and get access to some of these programs you've done in the past. Some of the ones you mentioned earlier sound very interesting to me, so I really want to dig in and get to know the work that you've done, and appreciate your platform, and appreciate you inviting me to be on the show tonight. I really, really appreciate it. But it's getting pretty late. I know it's got to be getting late for you too, and so I'm gonna go ahead and leave and get some dinner in my belly, and get some rest so that I can get to the library in the morning, do some more research for the book.
On the grind. I love it. He's going to the library. Oh, hit me in the heart. I love it, Mr. Jackson. Man, my apologies for taking up all your time this evening. He could have got about 4 chapters written if he hadn't fooled around with us for this here Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. I have learned so much we will nab the book, Midwest Nice Apartheid. He said the deadline is August. We might have messed that up a little bit today, but I'm sure he'll compensate and get it done. We will be looking forward. If you're in the Milwaukee area, go ahead and check out the previews in advance. Man, thank you so much, Mr. Jackson. Enjoy the rest of your evening and eat something great for dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gus. It's been a pleasure, and I'm hoping this isn't the last time that you and I have a chance to talk about some of these issues.
Oh,
thank
for
you
sure.
For the opportunity.
For sure.
Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We will be in touch, and we'll be waiting on the book, sir. Waiting on the book. Eat something nourishing, and we will be in touch soon. Enjoy the summer. Drink lots of water, Mr. Jackson, and keep up the writing.
Okay. Thanks, Gus. Take care, man.
Right on. Have a great evening. Peace. Context of White Supremacy. Could have seen him in person. I went a few hours too early and I missed the flyer, but at any hoodles, compensated. Mr. Jackson requests, hey, subscribe on Substack, SUBSTACK. Subscribe. He said he's trying to build up followers and such. I just subscribed as we were talking, so it's not too difficult because I could, do two things at once. One report, this is June 16 of this year, talking about racism feels like torture sometimes. How about that? I can relate. Anybody out there? Especially if you're in Wisconsin, you gotta go to these you gotta go to Sheboygan. Woo-wee, I bet. Anywho, we'll take a quick break, see if any folks have thoughts, observations to share. Matter of fact, before we take a quick break, so people don't think I'm telling tales about the tennis ball bombs, literally the first picture when you walk into the America's Black Holocaust Museum is Dr. Cameron. It says, welcome to America's Black Holocaust Museum. I, Dr. Cameron, its founder for years, I greeted museum visitors in person and gave them tours through these exhibits. I'm still here with you today as we explore the tragedies and triumphs lived by people of African descent in America. And then he goes on to tell you about some of his personal history, and he says, I was born, click the wrong tab. He says, I was born in 1914, La Crosse, Wisconsin. My father was a barber when I was young. My family moved to Birmingham, Alabama. There at 8 years old, a spectator forced me to watch a lynching. Later, my mother moved my two sisters and me to the small town of Marion, Indiana, where I was nearly killed in a lynching 8 years later. One sweltering August night in 1930 during the Great Depression, two older teens invited me on what they said would be a joy ride. Joy for them. They stopped the car at a secluded Lover's Lane to rob a young white couple. I recognized the man as one of my longtime shoe shine customers and took off running for home. As I ran, I heard a gunshot. I later learned that during the attempted robbery, the man was killed. That night I was jailed with two other boys, Abraham Smith and Tommy Shipp. A mob of over 10,000 people gathered around Marion's courthouse. They pulled Abe and Tommy from jail, beat and hung them. Then they came for me, beat and dragged me to the same tree with a rope tightening around my neck. At that last moment, I was miraculously saved. They tried me as an accessory before the fact and sent me to prison for 5 years. There I began writing my memoir, A Time of Terror, a survivor's story. Paroled at age 21, I then attended college in Detroit. I met and married a beautiful nurse named Virginia. We would be married for 68 years. That's kind of unprecedented now. And send all of our 5 children to college. That too. We moved to Anderson, Indiana to raise our kids and start our own business. I returned repeatedly to nearby Marion to interview witnesses to the lynching. In 1952, our family moved to Milwaukee to escape the threats of violence. by the Ku Klux Klan and others angered by my work for civil rights. Now that's kind of like, it was so violent and the Klan was so bad and the racism so tough, we came to Milwaukee. Woo! Man, anyway, Dr. James Cameron, a legend, because he did way better in Milwaukee than me. It's no way I could have stayed there. He didn't just stay there, he kind of flourished. I mean, to the degree that you can, under System of White Supremacy, Racism, museum still there, going strong. He has passed away almost a decade, I think. Museum is still there, rolling with constructive information. Had a talk with Mr. Jackson that I kicked myself for missing. So he did a phenomenal job in a very challenging environment, to put it mildly. Dr. Cameron. Book, again, you need a book. A Time of Terror. A Survivor's Story. Dr. James Cameron. Now, I did say tennis ball bombs. I would not want anyone to think Gus T is up here lying on the 414 Cream City. Not at all.
New video of a startling explosion that rattled a South Side neighborhood.
Yeah, so the explosion believed to be from a homemade tennis ball bomb. It happened late Saturday night near 33rd and Pabst Avenue, near Forest Home. 12 News' Nick Bohr joining us there live.
And Nick, the blast damaged a vehicle and several garages.
Right, you can see some of the damage to this garage here where the car was parked in front of these pockmarked holes, all from bits of tennis ball that were projected during that explosion. They look like this. They're scattered all across the alley, and it was all captured on video. In a dark alley just before 11 Saturday night, a Honda Pilot comes to a stop. A passenger gets out, appears to place something on a parked car, and drives off.
It was very loud.
As that something detonates.
My husband was in the garage where we had gas tanks, and if it would have been any closer, we could have had a serious issue. I would have lost my husband.
As it is, Brittany Ortiz-Judich came out of the house to find her car heavily damaged.
There were pieces of tennis balls everywhere. They caused damage to our vehicle. This is our family vehicle. They also caused damage to our garage and to the neighbor's garage, and everyone is pretty shook up about it around here.
Ortiz-Judich has spent the last 2 days gathering video, one showing the same Honda Pilot on nearby Pabst Avenue just before turning into her alley.
I have no idea who would want to do this. This seems very random. I'm not sure who could possibly have done this.
Milwaukee police responded collecting evidence and in their report referred to the tennis ball bomb as, quote, an illegal firework. The ATF has in the past issued warnings about the homemade devices.
Can be lethal, absolutely.
They classify the tennis ball explosives as, quote, an illegal destructive device. Ortiz-Judich can attest to their destructive capability.
The makeshift bomb was thrown where we believe right here, and the impact had totally completely bent this, and for somehow it got underneath the hood.
Just really extensive damage there, Nick. Do police have any idea who did this?
Not yet, but we know there were at least 2 people in that vehicle, the driver and the passenger, who hopped out right here and put that explosive device on the car that was parked right here. Of course, there's always a lot of reports about illegal fireworks this time of year leading up to the 4th of July. This clearly, though, was something more dangerous, something very different than your common firework, and police are certainly asking for the public's help in trying to identify who did this.
2 big questions: who and why would someone do this? Nick Bohr reporting live in Milwaukee.
They do while in Milwaukee. And in fact, remember the Anarchist Cookbook? Remember that? The poor man's James Bond. Remember that? Folks who Catherine Massey Book Club, back in effect Friday, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the only time, 8 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Pacific for the cows. But all those books Anarchist Cookbook and all the like. I never hear those books come up when they get to talking about book bannings and all that. It's never those books. It's never, hey, we don't need no more wacky concoctions for how white teens can put together no bombs, say I want to do the Columbine thing. We had enough of that. Nope. 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 But that's what the first thing I thought. Tennis ball bombs. And they got the video where you can see them on the surveillance going by and boop, pow. Could have killed somebody easily. Who would do such a, even that now, who would do such, that don't seem like Leroy. I could be wrong. That don't seem like Leroy. That what I just said, that's Dill, Reb, Unabomber, Ted, because is that Eric Rudolph, really? Anyway, we'll keep an eye out, see what happens with the tennis ball bombings in Milwaukee. We should be here on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, neutralizing workplace racism, and then Friday, book club, normal time. Mary Kay Letourneau. Matter of fact, if I can, Mary Kay is a great illustration. Now, I could say Mary Kay or Jeff Dahmer because it's really same thing. Ain't they both blonde? They like them young. Police caught them both early. All this could have been nipped in the bud way in advance, but all they had to do was, hey, man, throw that blonde hair back, you know. Calm down, officers. And it wasn't just one officer. It was multiple officers had a chance. This could have been nipped in the bud. Hey, because you can't just say pretty white girl and she batted them eyelashes and whipped that blonde hair, because Jeff is not a pretty white man. I did hear that while I was in Milwaukee, but I'm just going to say it. Jeff is not a pretty white man, race soldier. Talking about Jeff Dahmer. Either way, Jeff said, calm down, sir, ma'am, officers. Everything's fine. That's the same thing Mary Kay said. Calm all that down. Nothing improper here. If you help me find my skirt, we'll be on our way. Book Club, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. But I said my connect, man, I frequently hear it suggested that white people practice racism, and somehow this is in some way related to white people are unfamiliar with the Negro. They've never met a black person. They haven't spent any time around black people. They're totally ignorant about what it is to be classified as black and what the Negro does. None of that makes any sense to me at all, because I do not know why the response would be, I have never met a dark person. I've never met a so-called Laotian person. I've never met a so-called Asian person. My first response is terrorize and abuse these people in all areas of people activity and kill them. Why would that be the reflexive response to people that you've never, if you're ignorant about them, these might be some of the coolest people in the world, right? You don't know. Why would the immediate response be organized, systemic abuse of them all and kill them? Lots of them, for no reason. That does not, and the justification because we're unfamiliar with them. Never met them before. Haven't hung out with them. No. But the other part of it is it's not logical and just it's not evidence-based. Jeff Dahmer hung out with a lot of niggers. Maxwell Anderson, he invited Sade Robinson out on a date. This is not an idiot. Mary Kay, she hung out with non-white people. Vili, he's non-white. Not black, but non-white. You got lots of it. And matter of fact, they told me on the Dahmer tour in Milwaukee, Cream City, they said, look at here, Gus T, where Jeff came and nabbed up some of these victims, young, teen, black people, non-white people. They had a whole house where black children, teens, stayed. He called them underprivileged, down and out, nowhere to go. This was the red light district. It was known throughout Cream City. Hey, want to do something strange for some change? You like young, dark meat? Jeff, that's his. Hey. Jeff used to hang out there all the time, as did other child rapists. Hey, Mary Kay might have taken a trip from Seattle to New Orleans. What is that? You got young dark ones. Hey. You on double date, Jeff? I submit humbly. He mentioned George Washington. Dr. Welsing said, fondling fathers. If this was a problem of we're unfamiliar, this problem would have been licked on the plantation, and literally so. All that rape going on and what have you, we real familiar, super familiar. I said, and you got all these, and matter of fact, it's in the deeds, man. Now, in Whitefish Bay, they didn't say we not going to ever have no nigger in Whitefish Bay. That's not what it said. It would say, we're not going to have no niggers unless you're going to shine shoes, cook cabbage, okra, fried chicken, iron shirts, clean the lavatory, have sexual activities with a white person, male or female. If that's what you're going to do, come here and be a slave in Whitefish Bay. We might even let you live in the house. No problem. But you actually you own the house. You didn't come here to clean the steps, do some landscaping, wet nurse a white child. You actually came here to live with your woo. Now, if you want to come over here and do, cut my grass, well, hey, you might be able to do that for 20 years. Now, you can't come inside and get no beverage or water or nothing like that, no lemonade. We don't allow dark people to drink out of our dishes and such. But you can cut the grass, take out the trash, do something crash for some cash. Hey, God, thank you. But that is, Mary Kay Letourneau coming up Friday. But I submit that the problem is not white people are unfamiliar with black people, and that's why they practice racism. I submit white people study the Negro. That's how they're able to dominate us for so long and all over the world. Like I said, when I went to the library in Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin, it was a white woman. She was not even 25. If I had to, I'm going to say 24. And I don't even think she was 24. We're going to say 24 just for, argument. I got to mention, she knew it all. Said to James Lawrence, son downtown. That's right. She knew it all. White folks bay. Yeah, white. Oh, yes. Don't let no niggers. She knew it all. All the maps. She said, oh, yeah, I'm familiar. I pulled out half of them. No. I know. Expert. No. Problem is that, in matter of fact, she even had personal anecdotes. I think her name was Jane, the librarian at the American Geographical Society Library. It's such a long title. But she said she grew up, she was native to Milwaukee, so she went to Milwaukee Public School. She said, I remember the white people from the outskirts, the exact places that he named, Waukesha, Mequon, Cedarburg, Finsville, all those places that where ain't no niggers, where it's but 0.0% nigger, 0.4% nigger, that sort of thing. She said she remembered they would have high school, basketball competition, volleyball, whatever, lacrosse. They'd be playing sporting events, and she said she remembered that we hated them because they were racist, and that's exactly what she said. It was like she took a millisecond to think of how she should phrase. She said, yeah, that's what we hated them because they were racist. They hated us because they were racist, and we hated them because they were racist. And we had black people at our school. It would be all white, the people, whatever team we're playing against, it'd be all white people, and they're all white fans. And so as soon as they get off the bus, now, I had just heard this literally like days before. One of the surrounding areas, they had some sort of sports contest. I don't remember. Waterford, that was which way it was. I just don't remember which way it was. Were they going into Milwaukee, or were the team from Milwaukee was going out to Waterford? But it was the same thing. You know, oh Lord, the apes have come in from Cream City. Hide your purses, hide the white women in your wallets, hide the white women in your wallets. Oh Lord, Lord. That sort of thing. White people are not ignorant about it. The exact anecdote that he gave, I cannot stress enough. Again, we got another black person, no definition of racism. But I cannot stress enough the amount of times that I have heard from people classified as not white, where white people get astronomical credit and they've done nothing. And when I say credit, like, this is an anti-racist, talking about no count admitted racist known as Tim Wise, admitted racist known as Jane Elliott. You can run the gauntlet. No count white people, even John Brown, really. You can run the gauntlet of these white people that we will sing their praises and adulation. Oh, I love me some white. Even in Milwaukee, they'll say Father Gropey. That'll be one. Groppi. Father Gropey. So he led the Negroes like Moses out on the civil rights marches. I'm going to say it again. The only lesson that I got from that is the same one I told Mr. Jackson. White people cannot be ignorant about racism. What is the lesson that I learned from Father Gropey? What happened to Father Gropey after he did his time playing around with the Negroes on the march? He was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. I put some bass in my voice and speak up. New Pope and all that. I don't care. I said, man, they don't even excommunicate you from the Catholic Church if you rape a child. Sometimes you can rape about 15 dozen children and they don't excommunicate you. Ain't that facts? Father Gropey ran around with them niggers in Milwaukee and he got excommunicated. What did he do? He ended up driving a bus in Milwaukee where they don't even have non-Negro bus drivers for the most part. Father Gropey driving a bus. You got your transfer? I thought you were leading them. You got your transfer or not? White people cannot be ignorant about racism. But they get credit so easy, man. Like, they don't have to do nothing, man. They say, well, you know, I voted for Obama. And that's all they did. Nothing. They didn't invest no money. I didn't go shop at no black enterprise or business or what have you for a week or a month. I didn't invest $10,000 in Sade's Voice Foundation. What did you do exactly? Well, you know, I told my dad that I thought it was kind of messed up what happened in the Trayvon Martin murder trial. Did you send his mother a jar of peanuts? Gift card to Target? Get well soon call? Like anything? Did you go out and do a march? You didn't do no George Floyd protest and roll around the street for a little while? You didn't do none of that? Nothing. It sure is messed up about what happened to old Trayvon. But you didn't do, remember it was real popular, you get your sweatshirt, remember that? You go on social media and post, got my sweatshirt, I'm Trayvon. You didn't even do that? Bar is real low for people classified as white. They have the most power. They could solve, that's one too. I don't think we grasp, white people could solve this problem like today. They don't need no black people, Mr. Jackson or anyone else, expert, brilliant he is, U.S. Navy and all that. But they don't need no non-white person, Dr. Welsing or any of us, to come out and tell them what to do. How have you mistreated the Negro? What is the African American? None of that. Stop practicing racism. We heard yesterday, hey, Mr. Brent Arnold, suspected racist, Whitefish Bay homeowner with a racist covenant. Why don't you sell your house at a discount to some black people You are white. You've benefited. You've lived there for 25 years. I'm sure you could get another piece of property. You can figure it out. And you got children that are older. One of them's 18, so you're about to be what they call it, empty nester. You probably won't even need all that space coming soon. You can what they call that, downsize, get a smaller house, and contribute to eliminating racism. You sound like we were talking Greek. Like, what? You talking about? What? Sell at a discount? What? You know how hard it is to find property and, man, real estate going on? We didn't get how much equity we didn't gain. Whoa, I'm Leroy not getting this. You come visit for a day or two. You're not going to stay longer than a day, though. You come visit for a couple days, but yeah, Leroy not getting this. Whoa, we came. We can hold on to it. We can hold. Yes. Come on, man. White, I don't have no Navy or military credentials at all. I humbly submit white people are not guilty. White people are not ignorant about white supremacy, racism, the appropriate word based on evidence. White people are dedicated to white supremacy, racism, and it came up again. It must be, it's something about Milwaukee. It's something in the water for sure. It's lead and something else in the water, because you hear it came up again today. Not all white people are racist. Now again, when we get down to the evidence, it's real threadbare. Which white people are you talking about? It can't just be the white person who said, "Oh shucks, man, I'm messed up by Trayvon." Like, oh God, like, come on, that. Woo, we're gonna have to get somebody. Your Father Gropey, the bus driver. That's you talking about? Not all white people. Come on. Brent Arnold, the white dude who was raised in a racially restricted region and lived in a racially restricted region currently for a quarter century and had 0 Negras in his house after 25 years. That is the non-racist white person? You're going to have to show me something. The victims guaranteed qualified, but that is not my opinion, just based on evidence. And I humbly submit again, I think it is something quite weird that's like something to proselyte. That not all white people are racist. Now, let's not get carried away. Make sure we get that on. Is this on? Is it? Hello? Testing? Okay. We got to get, if we're going to talk about racism, has it been said? Not all white people racist. Now, you know I'm talking about you, Jane. Teddy, I see you. And they're like, come on. That I humbly submit. That is a massive part of why we have not solved this problem. We are confused, and white people do a lot to add to the confusion. But, ooh-wee, even that white chick in lacrosse. Maybe you're estranged from your parents. Maybe you're not. But racists do argue with other racists about what we going to do with our Negras. That does happen. That does not mean you got a white person who is not racist. Come on now. We got 2 racists who disagree. How we going to run the plantation? What we going to do with Leroy? Ain't nobody said Leroy is equal. Not all white people is right. Why you got to keep saying that? If it's true, why you got to keep saying that? Not all white people is right. They put something in the water. I'm telling you, they put something in because they don't even come up it doesn't even come up with a prompt in the conversation. It'll just erupt. Did you have anything to add, victim in New Jersey? We did our obligatory, but did you hear that? It came up again today. Not all white people is red. You didn't hear me say all white people is red. You didn't hear me say that, or nothing even leading to that, but it did come up. Did you hear that, or have other commentary, victim in New Jersey?
You know what? No, I missed that, but it's not, it's not surprising, and I would say this, I give him credit because if we're honest, it's most black people are not, how can I say, courageous or brave enough to really talk about racism to white people. So even with that being said and him being courageous in doing that, I think it's just programmed enough to just, our response is to say that, not all white people are racist. It's kind of like a disclaimer, in a sense. So it's really not surprising, but no, I didn't hear it. Because I came in kind of late in the broadcast.
Right on. Did anything else stand out? Any other commentary you wanted to get in based on what you heard from Mr. Reggie Jackson?
Yeah, so I came in late, and I didn't hear, I had to click over at a phone call come in, so I didn't hear his response when I asked a question about reparations, so I have to listen to the playback. So I guess I have to ask you, what is his goal? What does he expect to accomplish by having these conversations with white people? Did you ask him that?
I did. I asked him, best case scenario, what is going to be accomplished with going to do all of this? And he said that the white people, they invite him out, they'll pay him to come and do this because they want to learn. They have a group of white people, not all, but a group of white people who are curious, and I think that's the exact phrase that he used, curious, which, I don't know, it just struck me as just significant phrasing. It like the first thing that came to mind was it struck me as almost like drug use, like people would say, oh, I'm curious about ecstasy, or, curious about opioids or whatever. Or some sort of sexual activity, I'm curious about bi, I've heard about it and that sort of thing. But either way, maybe that's just me. Either way, but he said white people are curious about it. They'll invite him out. They want to learn. They want to know. They haven't met, what I just said, that they have not been around black people. They don't know any black people personally. So they want to learn, and that if they get this information, they're ignorant, they haven't been told this in high school, so if they get this information, they will do better. They will treat black people correctly, somehow stop practicing racism to a degree. That seemed to be the thought process, and that some of them even feel bad, guilty about this somehow. That seems to be the goal. If you can just get more white people of this ilk, since not all of them are racist, if you can just get more of them and share this information so that they're informed about this, better, they'll do better. That seems to be the thought process, unless I've misunderstood.
Okay, so to sum it up, Mr. Jackson thinks not all, but some white people are ignorant about racism, what it is, how it works, and how they participate in racism. So one could, from what you just said, it makes sense that, Mr. Jackson would say that, not all white people are racist. So, and I'm pretty sure all the studying that Mr. Jackson is doing, and, kudos to him, I'm pretty sure that a lot of his studying are coming from, white institutions, libraries, and white authors. So without leading Mr. Jackson to a said conclusion, I just hope in his studies he comes to the conclusion that white people are not ignorant. Even the ones he think are ignorant about racism, they're not. We are still learning.
Amen. I'm certainly still learning myself. But yeah, if anybody is ignorant about racism, Gus T, Leroy, Lakeisha, black residents of Milwaukee, we are ignorant about racism, white supremacy, not the white people of Cedarburg, La Crosse, Madison, Sheboygan. I've heard Mr. Arnold. He said, "Hey, they," or it's not Mr. Arnold, or he said engineered, which is true. That these locations were engineered by white people for white people, with the exclusion of Negroes deliberately in mind, explicitly in mind. That's not ignorant. That's not guilt. That is, man, this is exactly what we wanted to do, which is what I humbly submit. That is racism. This is exactly what white people want to do all over the world and into infinity. And I don't know who the people who you think are not racist, but man, you'd have to show me who they are and what are they doing. Let's look at the record. It can't be Brent Arnold, not racist. Again, the white guy who has lived for 25 years in a racially restricted region, he's not racist. It's got to be, at minimum, he has lived around some racist, like plural, for years. At minimum, why not? Hey, I'm sick of this. I got to look at racists all day long. Every time I come out of my driveway, racist over there. And I know Phil is racist. I've been doing this work. She doesn't support Bay Bridge and our efforts to get niggers over here, and I try and talk to her. She doesn't even open up the... I see you. I see you. I know she's racist. I got them all over here. Some in back of me, too. See? And I'm tired of it. I'm going to go. They got property over near Lincoln Park. I use the pool. Get me some property over near Lincoln Park, and it might not be as pretty, and they might have, a few extra niggers, and the amenities might not be as nice, but hey, I don't have no niggers. Oh, excuse me. I won't have no racists. I have plenty of niggers, but no racists. And it's one thing I can't stand, it's a racist. We didn't hear that from Mr. Arnold. And I don't hear that from white people in general. That's justification. Why are you moving out of this neighborhood? Too many racists? Why are you leaving Cedarburg? Too many racists?
Reverse white flight.
Come on. Come on. That's not even a term. You making up old cockamamie Negro slang. Reverse white. What is that? What are you even talking about? That doesn't exist. What white people say that, man, they tricked me. I moved out to Thinsville. I thought they were about justice and it's a new day. Man, do you know they got 0% Negroes? I said, what's going on here? Don't rock the boat now. Don't tell me. I don't hang out with no racists. We got on out of there and fast. Buddy, we moved on down to Brown Deer. Now, got nice black neighbors and we eat Ethiopian food. Talk about they got pictures of Luau Cinder and everything. Who says that? Come on, man. I told you, out in White Folks Bay, they didn't even invite no niggers to come hear about Jeff Dahmer. I didn't say give them no money. I didn't even say give them a free ride. I just let them know the lecture is happening. I don't... Leroy's... Man, come on. And then, that's one more time, I thought white people are ignorant about racism. They had a lecture in Whitefish Bay before I left. They spent the whole time talking about racism on a global scale. They talked about Hitler and Nazi Germany. They talked about it on a global, and they made sure to connect the two in their talk. It would have been one Negro present if I wasn't there. It would have been one Negro present if I wasn't there. That's what they wanted to. We didn't even say for the Negro. Did you have anything else, Victim, in New Jersey?
No, yeah, but I will say, Mr. Jackson, brilliant. He even alluded. He also even kind of said the same thing that Emily Flitter said on your show, and I think she also. I'm not sure if she put it in her book. I didn't read it yet. I have it, but she says that what she said, how black people underestimate how much influence white people have on their lives, and Mr. Jackson said something similar, where like, you know, everything that's going on with black people, like, you know, it's not our fault. Like, you know, black people really don't understand how much influence white people have on our lives. You know, we underestimate the power of white people. And even what you just said, Gus, I mean, we're looking at white power in real time. You know, when white people want some justice, you know, hey, you're not going to badmouth the IDF, you know, non-black person, you know, let's snatch your visa. You know, you can't come to this country and perform. Claudine or Claudia Gay, Harvard University. Hey, you know, get these students in line. You know, we're not going to tolerate no anti-Semitism. You're out of here. So white people, when they want things to get done, when they want something to stop, they take action. You know, so racism is something that is permitted, that's allowed, and that's agreed upon. Not some white people. I'll say all white people.
Get in trouble for saying that for sure. Like, whoa. He cut his microphone. Get some radical militant. What? Racist? What? You got white babies and comatose white people and John Browns? Jesus Christ. They'll probably have some new favorites to add in there. You know, if you give them enough time, they'll have a few more. I don't know who it is, but they'll add a few more. Either way, VG, I did learn a lot from Mr. Jackson, and certainly am looking for the book because I did learn a lot, but that's just a very common, I've said that for years now, that's a very commonly held viewpoint that not all white people are racist. I humbly submit the evidence just does not hold much at all. Individually for any particular white person that you are thinking about, and then collectively, and again, all this really just comes, what does it mean to be classified as white? That, I think, would answer this question forever. Any hoodles. What Gus T did in Wisconsin, study the system of white supremacy racism. Let's see. I did actually get that statistic, and I was pretty accurate to the numbers in terms of, I was looking at the population for Milwaukee, but that's neither here nor there, although the numbers were pretty accurate for that too. The specific numbers I was looking at were for the prison rates, and I think I did actually find those as well. Let me see here. Yep. Oh my goodness. Okay. My pictures from the Black Holocaust Museum. Like I said, Oprah Winfrey spent much of her youth growing up in Milwaukee. I have to find out, like, what was Oprah doing in Milwaukee? Like, what, when, how, where? Anyway, so this is from the American Black Holocaust Museum. Milwaukee's 53206 zip code is 95% black and has the highest incarceration rate in the so-called country. As of the 2010 census, 12.8% of black male residents of Wisconsin were incarcerated. The national black male incarceration rate was then 6.7%. As of the 2010 census, 1.2% of white male residents of Wisconsin were incarcerated. Now, it doesn't even give the incarceration rate for black females in Wisconsin, but I'm going to wager it's not 12%, or they would have posted it. 12.8% of the black males in Wisconsin are incarcerated. With the mugshots, they might intend it to be higher. Whew, that's why I said it's dangerous in Milwaukee because they got the tennis ball bombs, but it's dangerous in Wisconsin, period. Especially if you are classified as a black male. I do give him massive kudos because they tell me, call me, hey, look at here, Gus T. We've been listening to your podcast, seen you on YouTube and such, and I don't know about that vegan thing because we love some cheese out here, but that counter racism, maybe, racially restricted regions. We don't have no Leroy's out here, so yeah, we'll put you up, hotel, come out, do a lecture, and we'll chat it up. We got some folks, and yeah, we'll kick the ideas around. Not you, of course. just joking. But we'll kick the ideas around. We'll do it up. Set your price. You come on out to Sheboygan, and we'll do it weekend. It'll be great. We'll watch some football and everything. I cannot tell you that I would be, boy, I'm going out to Sheboygan and do it up and see if I can get me a few G's. They're like, man, they're going to pull the okie doke. Matter of fact, I'd be thinking, what do you say? Victim in Chicago, Henry in Chicago, he said, man, you go to a party or event, you are the only black person present. Run. That's what I'd be thinking. Like, man, I am taking my life. I'm going to have to get the Life 360. I'm going to have to tell Miss Scarborough and them, see if I can get me a little team of folks to go with me up there so I'm not, but man, shoo. He said he went by himself. Be fine. Told his brother, I got it. It's going to be fine. Courageous. Now, he was in the Navy, so he, trained in combat and everything. And, I got it. He might even have his firearm. Like, I got it. Calm down. I got it. He said for the most part they behaved. So, hey, right on. He's a braver dude than myself. Because, boy, I would not. I'd been frightened. You want me to go out to Cedarburg to do what? What? I'm good. Anyway, look out for the book, Midwest Nice Apartheid. Lots of juicy tidbits, Ernest Lacy and all of the rest of it. Will be maybe tell us about that white woman in La Crosse, right? Daniel Bales, get that one too. The Confession from the White Officer. We get all that information. Anyhoodles, we'll be here tomorrow, Neutralizing Workplace Racism, Friday. Book Club, Mary Kay, and then compensatory call-in on Saturday. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy heading into the holiday weekend. They finna cut a fool. Let me say it 3 times for Wisconsin. Sobriety would be best. Stay out of the pubs and taverns for the next week. Sobriety would be best. You go down to Bradford Beach, Lake Michigan, you get that Mad Dog 2020. I'm going to tell you, they got the cameras up. They will tase you up good. That is not a good look. Have you on IG and TikTok. Look at what done happened at Bradford Beach. Got Leroy on the ground. Look at it. Convulsing. Look at that. Sobriety would be best. Holiday weekend, for sure. If you got to imbibe, stay your hind parts in the house. Definitely do not want to be in no vehicle. You are asking to be George Floyded. Might as well put a sign on, like, beat me down. Get your nigger knocker ready. Beat me down. I got my Mad Dog and it's sloshing around in the passenger seat. Beat me down right now. That's what you're asking for. Tell it to the young ones. Sobriety would be best. Creator, we ask that you help us invest our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice, not depending on the non-racist white people to change their racist conduct. Remind us not to waste non-white people's time and energy, especially our own. We got important, constructive black people like Mr. Reggie Jackson writing books about racism. Don't be wasting his time. No name calling black people. no throwaway offspring, no gossiping. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. And en route, you can subscribe to Mr. Jackson's Substack. It's free. I'll link. Cows signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.